You said that you love winning. What drives you more, the love of winning or the hate of losing?
Maybe equally, maybe both. I don't like losing, and I do like winning.
Say his name and he appears.
This is a friendship that'll never ever end.
Greetings and welcome to Winning 2024. How's everybody doing this evening? I hope you are all doing and living well. From the front lines of American politics battlefield, this is Winning 2024, where the truth breaks through the noise and solutions rise above the chaos. Tonight, the numbers don't lie. We're breaking down the latest polls that mainstream media won't show you. From coast to coast, we're tracking the real pulse of American voters. As our border crisis deepens, we'll bring you exclusive coverage from ground zero of America's immigration emergency. What Washington won't tell you, but Americans need to know. In Rig Watch, new revelations about election integrity that demand your attention. We're following the paper trail and exposing the manipulation happening right under our noses. Plus, breaking news, a FEMA whistleblower steps out of the shadows to reveal the disturbing truth about hurricane disaster response. Lives were at stake, but bureaucracy got in the way. And also, the January 6th investigation unravels. We've got the report from Blaze TV that exposes a web of deception reaching into the highest levels of government. This is more than news. This is a battle for truth. This is Winning 2024, live, unfiltered, and unafraid. The fight for America's future starts now. Get ready to deep dive, think critically, and join the movement that's taking our country back one truth at a time. This is Winning 2024. How's everybody doing out there? Wolfram, thank you so much for dropping these links. Remember to always listen to the wolf. He wipes his paws and lips and howls, and he's here. Thank you so much for also echoing that sentiment, Heidi. I appreciate that. And also there's Shelly talking trash and truths. Our hostess with the mostest, greeting y'all as you come in the door with a big hug. And thank you to each and every one of you that support the channel and are members of the Winner's Circle on a monthly basis. Your contributions and your support means the world. And also thank you to Shelly and Wolfram who support us over on Rumble as well. You can do that as well over on Rumble. Links will be in the description, the chat shortly. They're already in the description. And we're broadcasting live, of course, on Rumble X and YouTube this evening. As always, this is Winning 2024. Let's go. So, guys, how's your day been? Happy Halloween, first and foremost. Hope you guys are having a good one. Anybody going trick-or-treating tonight? Nah. That's for kids. But we are doing great. We had an amazing interview with Gary Franchi and Next News Network on our last show on Tuesday. It ran very late. If you didn't get to see it, please catch it on the rewatch. Awesome stuff there. He went into a lot of detail about his past, and we had a great conversation. We talked about the future, we talked about the present, we talked about it all. It was a lot of fun. I'm just getting this links into the description here. All right. And he gave me some advice on how to pep things up a little bit. I'm going to slowly be implementing those changes as I can. And we'll see what it does. Let's see if it helps. Let's see if it helps the channel get out there. Let's see. I'm going to do this. And there we go. Free speech links, all one word. That makes it fit. And pin the comment. And right off the bat, we get to do this. Thank you so much for the $50 super chat, talking trash and truths. Happy birthday to my absolute favorite avatar, man. Thank you so much for that. That's awesome. Yeah, it's another year in the books. Made it around another time. And here we go. Thank you so much for that, Heidi, as well. Yeah, thank you so much. You know, just happy to have made it around another turn. I'm not a big birthday person, but yep, I'm more about making my kid's birthday special if I can, best I can. And, I'm just happy to still be here fighting the good fight with each and every one of you, week in and week out, trying to bring this thing home. Election 2024, trying to bring it home. We're getting close. We're getting really close. And in doing that, we are seeing a lot of good news coming out of the polls. We take it with a grain of salt, but it's always good to keep up to date with what's going on. Kind of tells us the picture. And also it helps us get juiced up for a win here. And the great news about this time around is the popular vote. It's really looking strongly in Trump's favor. I can't wait to see the cope front coming out of the Harris supporters, the establishment knee benders, the ones who bend over and take it from the establishment, who want Agenda 2030, who want to see all the horrors that we've seen for the last 4 years, or last really 12 out of the last 16 years continue. These poor mind control victims, they are always out there trying to bring America down, and they don't even know they're doing it, and that's the sad part. Oh man. Hey Max, how you doing? Yeah, I had it first. Yep. Yeah. And thank you for that. All right. Well, I'm gonna play it for Wolfram because Wolfram. Wolfram, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Happy birthday, boss man. I appreciate it. Wolfram is my top mod. He is the one running the show here out in the chat, man. Wolfram, thank you so much for being here and doing all you do, man. I can't express how much I appreciate it. And you're here each and every show, first one in the door, making it happen, and I truly appreciate it. I truly appreciate it. There's not enough words for me to say how much I appreciate it. Yeah, and please make sure you subscribe to Max Mira. He has a great channel. He does great stuff. He's a great friend. And we've been friends for many years now. And Max is one of my favorite people out there. So make sure you subscribe to Max's channel. It's worth it. He has a great insight and great stuff on his channel that you just don't want to miss. All right, let me see. Remember the new border crisis documentary, Line in the Sand, links in the description. They're still there, still up and running. My twin brother, Winning Sir Reality, put it on his channel and it got taken down off mine. So you can go watch it over there while it's still there. That's the full stream we did. And also remember the documentary only link is on BitChute. That's still kicking. Where are we out on that one? Let's see. It's up to 81 views. All right. That's 81 views. That's 81 people that have taken that link and shared it with somebody or watched it from there. That's awesome. And I tell you, overall, we've gotten that documentary out to over 1,000 people just by our own efforts. And I don't even know what you guys have done, right? I don't even know what you guys have done behind the scenes, who you've sent it to, any of that. Just going by the numbers that I have. And I'm not even counting the numbers on X, like what that link over there is done. So I have to go down way far to find it. But I keep putting it out over and over and over again. And I make sure that people know that it's there and they can share it, because my line in the sand is that was not put out for free. It should have been. It should have been put out for free. And so I'm doing what I can to get it out up into the election. And then after that, I'll back off of that a little bit, but I'll leave the BitChute one to still be up. But I'm just driving home because it's such a red pill that it will turn voters around. I want to make sure that people that are on the fence, that maybe are still thinking that it's a good idea to vote for the establishment, that's Kamala Harris. In fact, we describe it this way very well.
You have people that are now realizing that, listen, this is not a left versus right thing anymore, okay? This is not a Democrat versus Republican thing anymore. This is establishment versus anti-establishment.
And the key truth is this: Kamala Harris is the establishment. Kamala Harris is the ultimate DC insider. Kamala Harris is the swamp.
There is no one they have targeted more than President Donald J. Trump. And there's a reason for that. Because they recognize that he doesn't bend the knee or kiss the ring in the establishment of Washington, D.C.
That's right. So you know you're on the right side when you are on the Trump train. And what does Kamala Harris say about that?
You also got to understand.
Absolutely nothing. Nobody can understand what that woman is talking about. Absolutely. Max going to make a new different channel was going to until I saw earlier today stunning brand new channel and video starring blue and yellow leotard and artard mans, tunes appropriately by BJ Thomas. Oh wow, yeah. Is there a new channel out there, Max? You have a wrench, don't you? There might be a new channel out there people need to check out. Anyways, yeah. Feel free to let people know about that new channel you're out there letting people know about. So yeah, that's a lot going on. And I appreciate each and every one of you being here. Like I said, with the let me see. Do this here and go. Okay. The numbers are speaking and we're listening. From swing states to strongholds, from county data to demographic shifts. This is the latest polls. We are where we cut through the statistical smoke and mirrors to show you what's really happening in election 2024. The mainstream media won't show you these numbers, but we will. Let's check it out.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you guys like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So we're currently 5 days away from the 2024 presidential election between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And we are going to be doing a deep dive in today's video, which we will put out another video later. But this video, we're going to be covering the Sun Belt states, North Carolina and Georgia, the eastern portion of the Sun Belt, as well as Arizona and Nevada, because these are states that Donald Trump would like to have in his column. He can win with just North Carolina and Georgia if he's able to get Pennsylvania, which is looking good for Trump. It's not a done deal, but I wanted to take some time out of today's video to kind of cover some of the recent developments that have been taking place, not just in polling, but in the early vote data. And Donald Trump is in a good position. Doesn't mean it's a done deal, but he's in a very good position. And time is running out right now for Kamala Harris and the Democrats. It's like, what exactly are they doing right now? She had the closing argument speech, which, by the way, was basically Trump this, Trump that. Everything that she's been saying and Democrats have been saying over the past few years and the past 9 years, to be honest, mixed with some relatively vague platitudes of crossing the aisle to get things done, presumably on issues that they both align on, which are not issues that the American people.
This is Trump dominating in key Sunbelt states.
Really align with them on, ironically enough, but that's besides the point. We get that. But we're going to dive into this. But really quickly, we have new merchandise. The store is going away. It's true. We got in 2020 and 2022 released shows that Donald Trump now has a 4-point lead. They had him down by 1. Now they have him up by 4.
In North
and in
Carolina.
every single poll except CNN, which they're all over the place, by the way, especially in the Rust Belt, where they're showing
CNN is panicking
that Kamala's going to win Wisconsin by Obama 2012 numbers. Where have we seen that movie before? But they're an outlier that we know. But the rest of the polling shows Donald Trump is in a good position. We polled North Carolina. We have Trump up by roughly around 3 points in the Tar Heel state. A lot of other pollsters are showing something similar. A lot of polls that had Trump down now show Trump up by 2. And I wanted to get into some of the early data, but you do look at the polls back in the day, currently at the 5-day mark before the election, 2016, they had Trump up by 1. Now it's important to understand that
coming up later, I got another special report about how a document came out about the 2020 election and how it looks like it was rigged. We already know what's going on with that, but we're going to take a look at that as well.
Trump overperformed that margin by 2.6 percentage points, and then in 2020 they had Biden up by 0.6, so Trump outran that by 1.9. The reason why I was able to predict that the polls would be inaccurate in North Carolina at both the presidential and the Senate level, and to a lesser extent the gubernatorial race, well, actually at a greater extent, but it was not a race that was as contentious, I guess you would say, but the polling error was worse there, but there were more undecided, so maybe it's not worth analyzing. But either way, when you look at this, Donald Trump in the polls, he's in a very, very good position as it stands now. He's gained in some of the final polls that have dropped out of North Carolina, and Democrats have just consistently believed that this was a state they can win. They've dumped a bunch of money in there. Trump is still holding strong. And the early vote is why I was able to predict 2020 correctly in the state at the level that I did. I said, Trump would win it by around, 1-2.
Well, I like political politics. He does all this analytical work.
That was the final margin, despite what a lot of the polling was showing. In fact, there was not a single nonpartisan poll that had Trump leading in North Carolina, I believe, that was released after like early September. But you see the early vote data. When Republicans right now are outvoting the Democrats, they have a 1.3% lead in the early voting. And that is huge, because if you go back in time and you look at history in 2022 and 2020, Republicans were down. They were down 38 to 31 in 2022. And of course, you had more people voting on election day. Republicans were able to make up the gap there. And then in 2020, you had a 37 to 31 Democrat advantage. So a little bit of a lesser margin there, but election day did happen to end up being roughly, around the same. If you look at North Carolina, the final totals, the Democrats were able to still manage to hold on to a lead in 2020. They did not in the midterms, where Republicans did better on election day there. And if you look at the 6 days out mark, this is huge, because Republicans on net are doing about 10 points better, And yeah, there's less people voting early, but still, this is a state where if you want to go back and look at what percentage of the final electorate voted early, it was still roughly 60% in 2022. And it's true that we don't know which Republicans are showing up, which Democrats, but judging from what we've seen, it does seem as if the less educated voter, which was less likely to vote in a midterm year and did not show up in high rates in 2022, they are showing up in higher rates now from the data that we have in all of these states. And not only are Republicans doing well, they're predicted to win the election day vote in North Carolina, which again, even if you combine the two in 2020, at the end of the day, they still ended up trailing by nearly 3. They had a narrow lead in 2020. Now in the early vote, they already had a lead. They're likely going to expand on that lead as we get closer to the election, but especially on election day, that's where they're going to be able to do well. And Donald Trump is probably going to win the unaffiliated vote by more than he won it by in 2020, because usually the unaffiliateds do break a little bit more Republican, at least at the top of the ticket. Now, for the governorship, it's a little bit of a different story there, but we're focused on Donald Trump's race right now. So North Carolina, it is looking good. The black turnout overall for Democrats is in the gutter. And that's a major problem for them. And you could look at Georgia, and it's arguably worse for them, because Georgia is a state where the whites tend to vote more Republican than they do in North Carolina. And you had the Abrams machine in 2020 that is kind of gutted right now, that was able to lead Biden to having like black turnout at like 30% of the final electorate. But right now, this is the early electorate in the state of Georgia. The election day will likely be even whiter in Georgia. Even in 2022, that was the case. 2020, it was the case. You're going to need to see a ridiculous surge for Democrats to even compete right now, because the black share of the electorate is like 26%. That is abysmal. That is not where they want to have it right now. You already had your 2 souls to the polls. They didn't really make much of a dent whatsoever. Nope. And when you see that, it's like, this is not good. They need to be running up the score. They need to be getting in the 31.
Yeah, it's about time Georgia gets its dignity back.
32%. I think in the early vote in the midterms, they had 32%. Right now, it's not looking too good for them where it stands at 26%. Some models might have it slightly higher, but then election day, it's still going to go lower. And it's still significantly below where it needs to be. If you're not having black voters make up 30% of the electorate in the state plus like they did in 2020, even if it's like 28 or 29, that's disastrous. And that doesn't even take into account the fact that Donald Trump is likely going to gain somewhat with that demographic that actually does show up to the polls. He got 6% of blacks in Georgia in 2020. That's not good news for Kamala Harris. They thought that, we're going to put somebody on the ticket who's part black, and they think that that's going to supercharge black turnout. But in reality,
we know that that's not true at all. He says they are, but isn't.
A lot of black voters have not resonated with somebody who was raised by their Indian mother in Canada. That's not an experience a lot of black Americans have. And, her fresh entrance to the political scene was kind of ruined by the fact that it got out about all the, criminal justice policy in California that she had. And honestly, it goes both ways, because she's locking up people for more inconsequential crimes while she's bailing murderers and rioters out of jail. You can't really please anybody when you have that track record if you're Kamala Harris. But both of those states, and in terms of the polling, not only is Trump polling well in Georgia, Georgia polls are historically very accurate. They were in 2022. They were in 2020. They were in 2016. There's no big polling errors in Georgia. And the polls that have been very accurate in Georgia, like the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, they are showing Donald Trump with a 4-point lead. Do I think he's going to win it by 4? If black turnout is actually going to be this low, it's on the table, depending on what happens. But either way, he's in a very good position in the state of Georgia, a much better position than he was in 2020. And that's despite the trends. And it is true that you have a lot of interstate migration that has declined. And I don't think you're going to see Biden, or Harris, I should say, post ridiculous margins like this out of.
Hey, you guys see that? That's how much space Fulton County takes up in Georgia right there. You see that? That's right through the middle of the city, all through there and down to the south side right there. And that's a city itself. Like that's pretty much all of it. And then right there next to it, can you see my cursor? Yeah, there you go. And then right there next to it, right there, it's DeKalb, Gwinnett, so on.
Fulton County, at least in terms of the total turnout. If black turnout's going to dip, you're not going to get an 80,000 vote advantage in Clayton County. But the rurals, if they hold strong with their turnout, that's very good news for Donald Trump. We'll have to see what eventually happens. But you're talking about like a 250,000 vote margin out of DeKalb County. Is that going to be replicated? It would be very.
Let's see. Estimated votes so far. Well, I'm in there somewhere.
Very unlikely as it stands today. That might dip significantly, and Donald Trump still might hold strong in his vote totals regardless. I think that you could make the case that he'll get a similar amount of votes in the state of Georgia that he got in 2020. Maybe it declines just because of the fact that you don't have this COVID environment where it's hyper political, but still from the early data, it seems like the rural areas, they're the ones that are very, very enthused to show up in Georgia. And it is a state where you did have 80% of its electorate vote early in 2020. And
look at that margin. That's ridiculous.
Stayed at 65.
That was all about stop counting and then run everybody out the door and then start counting again with ballots you have stuffed underneath the tables. And during that underneath overnight counting they did with nobody watching, they only logged 100 votes for Trump during that time. How about that?
% or so in 2022. That's another important thing to note. Now, North Carolina, in terms of what Trump needs to do to win that state, it's clear that he needs to run it up in a lot of these suburbs or exurbs of Charlotte and do a little bit better in some of these counties that are moving right. He doesn't even need to do a little bit better to win, but you would like to continue those gains just in case you end up losing a little bit here and there in the research triangle. But is that even a sure thing? Probably not by much, because a lot of those anti-Trump voters, they never voted for him in the first place. I don't think you're going to see that many defectors. But like I said, it all comes down to turnout. And we also have to talk about Nevada, because this state is crucial.
Yeah,
and this is a state where Democrats won the early vote in 2020 by 40,000 votes. Right now, Republicans lead it by 44,000 votes. This is referencing Nevada. And it's a state where the early vote's very predictive, because 90% of the electorate just about in 2020 and 2022 in the state of Nevada voted early. So the fact that we have a lot of votes already, and the fact that Republicans are the ones surging, and it's a state where you have a lot of working class voters, you're not going to have like a lot of these like, oh, I'm a Republican, but I'm voting for Harris. Like that's an Arizona thing, but the problem's a little bit overstated. Nevada's a state where the independents typically are not leaning heavily to the left. And judging based off of polling and fundamentals, Donald Trump likely is going to be improving with those independents to the point where, even if he does lose them by a few points, it's not exactly going to be enough. Nevada could be the surprise state of the night. Everything really just comes down to Clark County. Donald Trump needs to get it within 6 points, most likely, but turnout definitely is key. Democrats build up a firewall there. They had a big firewall in the early vote in 2020. Right now in Clark County, it's not looking so good for the Democrats. Republicans are, within like 10,000 votes or so in the Clark County firewall. That is abysmal news. If Clark County is like within 50,000 votes, the race is going to be very, very difficult for Harris to win, especially because Republican registrations all over the state are looking good. And Trump, judging based on what we're seeing in the Reno area, Washoe County, he's actually doing very, very well there. In the early vote, he possibly could improve. He might even flip that county. If that is going to be the case, then that's more room for error in Vegas, which still probably moves to the right. So Kamala Harris is going to be in a whole lot of trouble. And you look at the party registration changes, it's true. And those are people changing to be Republican, or new registrations that are Republican. That does not help Harris. They're not registering as Republicans for Harris. That's not how it works. And then we get to Arizona. And before we get to Arizona, we could talk about the polling in Nevada. But again, the early data in Nevada tends to be more predictive than the polling. It's a good thing that Donald Trump currently is in the lead in the state of Nevada in the polling. But still, I think the early data matters a little bit more. Then you look at Arizona, where Donald Trump currently has a lead of over 2%. And he's at 49% in the polls in the state of Arizona. That's good, including Maris. He's at 50. That's been the most accurate pollster in 2020 and 2022 in the Grand Canyon state. But Arizona, this is just massive, because you look at the early vote data that we see. Republicans, they've netted a lot of registrations from, even 2022. Since 2020, though, they've had on net like over 200,000 plus registrations compared to the Democrats in terms of the change. It was getting bluer under the Trump years. A lot of these Republicans defected, whatever, became independents, the McCain types. There's still some of them that are registered Republican, though. That's true.
McCain Those are independents. Those are Democrats.
But the new registrations do tend to be, you would think, more
Establishment
Trump
ran
friendly,
back
and
the
they are
last
showing up to vote.
stronghold
There
they
is
had.
more cannibalization on the Democrat side if you look into the data than there is on the Republican side. In this day in history, Democrats led in the Arizona early vote substantially. And even in 2022, they did lead in the early vote. Republicans typically do better in the last couple days of the early voting. The later mail tends to be more Republican friendly in Arizona. That's typically just the way that it goes. And election day tends to be more Republican. But it was a 63,000 Democrat edge in 2020, a 22,000 edge in 2022. And now that's been flipped on its head. Republicans lead by 163,000 votes in the state of Arizona. Even if Kamala Harris wins like 55% of independents, 10% of Republicans, like that's not going to be enough for her in the state of Arizona, just based off of the volume that we're seeing in the early vote. And you're looking at an electorate that's possibly going to end up being like R plus 10, R plus 11 when it's all said and done, much redder than 2022 even, but also more working class than 2022 because everybody wants to talk about the midterms. Here's the deal about the midterms. They were far more college educated than 2020. If you had the same educational demography in Arizona that you had in 2020, in 2022, Kerry Lake would be governor. That's what a lot of people don't understand, which Republicans are turning out. But the fact that you have this massive surge from these newly registered Republicans voting early, that's good news for Donald Trump. He may do better with Republicans this time around as a percentage compared to what he did in 2020. And that would be massive. I don't know if that's going to happen, but a little bit goes a long way. He's going to have to run it up in places like Yuma County, Mojave County, Yavapai County, Pinal County, where Republicans gained a lot of registrations, but they also gained a lot in certain parts of Maricopa County. He's got to hold his own in North Maricopa, East Maricopa, do a lot better in South Maricopa. I think he will, and then do better in West Maricopa to flip that county. He doesn't need to flip the county to win it. So long as it's under 2, he's probably going to win the state. I think he's the favorite there. I think he's the favorite in Nevada. I think he's the favorite in Georgia and North Carolina. He needs one Rust Belt state for victory. Kamala Harris needs all 3 of them. Who would you rather be? I think the answer is obvious, and I think the answer is Donald Trump. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Like this video down below, comment down below.
It's always good to start off with knowing where we stand, right? And he is surging in many places.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you guys like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So Donald Trump
leading nationally, and no Republican has won popular vote since 2004, and before that, 1988. Yeah, that's right. So we're having a lot of fun out there in the chat tonight, talking about somebody. Yeah, evidently there's a new channel there, IRL, huh? What's that about? Should we take a look? I think everybody should subscribe to that. I think they should subscribe to it and maybe watch the latest video. I know when I heard about it, I went over there and took a look at it, and I thought it was quite amazing. Quite amazing. All right. So actually, I meant to lead off with, man, I got to figure out what's going on with why every time I move my mouse, the screen moves. Like I try to move it up. It's like I have to I have some setting on my mouse right now where it's just driving me crazy. And so it's go back and forth, back and forth. But I should have come out here with I meant to come out here with the leading news of the day here. The big news of the day. This is the one everybody's talking about. Let's bring in, let's see. It's only 5 minutes. Let's bring in here, old school to the max, fighting for centuries. The good fight, Mark Dice, to break this news.
Donald Trump held a press conference earlier this evening from a MAGA garbage truck in order to denounce Joe Biden calling us garbage and to raise awareness of his comments, causing it to stay in the news cycle. Everybody knows curiosity killed the cat, and CNN couldn't help but air the press conference live.
Arizona.
Anna, I'm going to interrupt you for a moment. Stand by for a moment. Trump is answering some questions from reporters.
Joe Biden to make that. Oh, not just from reporters, from in a garbage truck, sir.
Trump is answering some questions from reporters.
Joe Biden to make that statement, it's really a disgrace. How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honor of Kamala and Joe Biden. Now, listen, I have to do something because Brett Favre is a great guy. He just endorsed me, and he's very important at this point.
Hold on a second. Yeah, I don't think that. I think that's you know, I think you guys kind of got to look a little bit closer at that one. Look a little bit closer at that one. Just look a little bit closer.
I mean, he's got a little problem for himself, and I thought it was very brave that he came out.
This press conference is being held in Green Bay, Wisconsin, by the way.
And I want to go over and see Brett Favre. We're all going together, I assume. You're going over. I'm going to make a speech. We're going to then try and beat the weather out because we have some bad weather coming in. I hope you enjoyed this garbage truck. Thank you very much.
All right. Trump sitting in a garbage truck in Green Bay, Wisconsin, getting ready to deliver his speech, answering a few questions from reporters. Kristen Holmes is there in Green Bay for us. Kristen, what's your analysis based on what we just heard from Trump?
Wolf, my analysis is exactly what we talked about before. They are trying to milk this for every single drop that they can. They want this to turn into what happened in 2016 when Hillary Clinton said that Trump supporters were a basket of deplorables.
And it already has, but this is 10 times worse. Here's pollster Frank Dunce on the Clown News Network talking about the likely repercussions of old Joe's little comment.
His comments seemingly describing Trump supporters as, quote, garbage. The Harris campaign is trying to downplay the effect of those comments. Of course they are. But I wonder if you think that those comments are going to move voters.
It's going to be huge because this is not some comedian saying something stupid and offensive at a rally where he should have been basically disinvited. This is the president of the United States endorsing his vice president, saying something. And I know that there's different interpretations about what he said. It's still inappropriate. He still shouldn't be doing it. And I've watched Trump already seize this. The basket of deplorables was significant, was meaningful in 2016. In 2024, I can promise you that this is going to drive Trump turnout. He's doing it already. I can see, I'm sure there's going to be ads on as soon as tonight about this.
And he hasn't seen the garbage truck press conference yet at this point. And while old Joe's comments likely won't convince any Democrat to come over and vote for the Trump side, what it will do, like Frank Dunn said, is motivate Republicans to actually vote. If you don't actually vote, then you personally are going to be responsible for subjecting us to 4 years, maybe even 8 years of this.
Look, everybody has a right to be heard, but right now I am speaking.
I'm speaking.
Oh, I'm speaking.
Did you hear her voice crack there? She was being heckled by her own side again. Thank you, Joe, for giving us perhaps the greatest gift as an October surprise.
Yes, and they went out and bit a child. They bit a child.
President Trump in a garbage truck in Green Bay, Wisconsin. He just
should be allowed near children.
Talking about, as you hear the horn there, talking about President Biden calling Trump supporters garbage. The White House tried to walk that back today numerous times.
He then took to the stage at his Green Bay rally, still wearing the orange reflective garbage man vest.
And I have to begin by saying 250 million Americans are not garbage.
Right.
This week, Kamala has been comparing her political opponents to the most evil mass murderers in history. And now, speaking on a call for her campaign last night, crooked Joe Biden finally said what he and Kamala really think of our supporters. He called them garbage. No way. No way. And they actually mean it, even though without question, my supporters are far higher quality than Crooked Joe or Lion Kamala. Higher quality. Higher quality. My response to Joe and Kamala is very simple. You can't lead America if you don't love Americans. That's true. You can't be president if you hate the American people, which I believe they do.
I'm Mark Dice. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you're new here.
Yeah,
check back out
subscribe to Mark. Definitely. Thank you, Mark Dice. Man, that. Let's go into this. Let's just go into this. I'm gonna say
and
the
as we have
end because there's some long segments to cover in that. Oh my God, dude. I'm gonna throw my mouse against the wall. It's not my mouse's fault. It must be the settings on YouTube or something. I don't know, but every time I try to just go down a little bit, it starts to try to scroll the page. So it's like it's really
long awaited. The New York Times has released its report, which many are saying was a direct attempt to get YouTube to censor prominent voices. It's not news, it's fake news. Utilizing conspiracy crackpots over at Media Matters, the New York Times ran what is a fake news story to try and get me as well as many others censored on YouTube. As you can see, there are many prominent figures here listed in their beautiful little animated GIF at the top of the New York Times page. Well, recently, we saw a post from Ben Shapiro where he said he'd been reached out to by the New York Times, asking him about a series of things that have been stated. Tucker Carlson said something similar, and I had posted, I too had received word from an individual. However, for me, all I can really say is he didn't ask for anything. He asked me to comment, but there was nothing to comment on. Then he puts in this story that I refused to comment. My guy, what am I supposed to comment on? I love this. The story basically says that while Media Matters is partisan, they did their fact checking, and all of us are posting misinformation, to which YouTube responded, none of this breaks the rules, and you're allowed to debate these things politically. What I love most.
Yeah, right. It's like that character that came here and tried to say that he was a Russian asset, and then he said
about this is that nowhere in the story does it say I ever did anything wrong. Hence, what am I supposed to comment on? Such a very, very weird circumstance to find ourselves in. Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson, Michael Knowles, Rudy Giuliani, whatever. They're allowed to have opinions in news and politics. And we're all following YouTube's rules. We at Timcast IRL follow them quite to the T, dotting our I's as well. So it's not going to work. I was asked several times about this, and I told everybody, guys, these stories pop up all the time. By all means, we can call it out, but I don't think it is meaningful in any real way. Here's what they wrote. Election falsehoods take off on YouTube as it looks the other way. Nico Grant says, in June of 2023, YouTube decided to stop fighting the most persistent strain of election misinformation in the U.S., the falsehood that President Biden stole the 2020 election from Donald J. Trump. Within months, the largest video platform became a home for election conspiracy theories, half-truths, and lies. They in turn became a source of revenue for YouTube, which announced growing quarterly ad sales on Tuesday. During 4 tumultuous months of this year's presidential campaign, researchers from Media Matters for America, which is a left partisan smear organization, they don't do legitimate.
It's a Soros smear
research. They're conspiracy theorists. A group that monitors information from conservative sources examine the consequences of YouTube's about face. While Media Matters is a partisan organization that regularly criticizes conservatives, reporters and academics frequently cite it as a source on YouTube misinformation because it devotes a significant resources to tracking the vast problem.
Media Matters is not an unbiased organization whatsoever. We all know who owns that.
The New York Times independently verified the research, examining all of the videos identified by Media Matters and determining whether YouTube placed ads or fact-check labels on them. From May through August, researchers at Media Matters tracked 30 of the most popular YouTube channels they identified as persistently spreading election misinformation to analyze the narratives they share in the run to the election. The 30 conservative channels posted 286 videos containing election misinformation. So that's, what is that? About 9 videos per channel. Oi! I post probably 20 videos per day, my dude. If of all these channels, you couldn't find nothing on me, forgive me for making errors when they arise. We often correct here at Timcast, and we actually have correction submissions. But you know what they do? They do this thing where, I'll give you one example. Fox once ran a story claiming that there was some evidence about the Seth Rich conspiracy theory. And then I said, wow, look at this story from Fox Business. Then it was later retracted. They said, aha, you have fake news. And I'm like, my guy, I am citing Fox News. Forgive me. What am I supposed to do? If the news is retracted later, what am I supposed to do about that? Obviously, we correct. And then we put up a new story. That's the misinformation they do. So 30 conservative channels, they don't actually break down, what did I say? I'd like to know. They say, because we post, what do we do? We do, I think we do 10 to 15 videos per day about. So what you're saying in 4 months with 10 to 15 videos per day, on average, you found 9 that you believe contained election misinformation. Here's the other thing. None of them did.
There you go. That's the gist of it right there. So, always with the shenanigans, those people. Always with the shenanigans. All right. We have one border piece tonight. We all know what's going on with that, but the late surge is happening. One we've been hearing about. And this is a great report on that. So, while Washington plays politics, hold on, let me make sure I have this set up right before I do that. I'm trying to do intros for the segments now. Okay. All right, we're good. All right. I'm going to do it like this. All right. Then I'm going to do it like this. Okay, while Washington plays politics, American sovereignty hangs in the balance. This is border crisis, raw, unfiltered coverage from the front lines of America's immigration emergency, from cartel operations to overwhelming communities, from policy failures to humanitarian disasters. These are the stories they don't want you to see.
Which could be as large as 2,000 migrants, follows at least 2 others just this month, with some saying they're coming now because they're worried about what will happen after the November election.
So a large caravan of asylum seekers is headed towards the U.S. border, traveling north on foot through Mexico. And for months, we've heard that the border is now more secure than ever, with new restrictions in place, not only to limit crossings, but to restrict who can seek asylum to only those who come in through an official point of entry. And that makes the purpose of this caravan quite strange. Why would thousands of people journey to America if they can't stay once they arrive, unless their goal is to arrive in a sanctuary city like New York?
Which is why we need to elect Trump, because he's going to get rid of sanctuary cities. And that means that we can go in there and clean them up for the people when their own governments, their own state governments won't do it for them, because they are corrupt to the core.
Mexico newspapers report at least 4,000 migrants are already on the move, and thousands more are leaving other Mexican cities. This, as many fear asylum in the U.S. may be cut back.
Well, it's probably manufactured. It's somebody in the organized crime level, or maybe one of these cartels that say, hey, this is the time to come. There's also an interest of the would-be.
Right? They're going to get their last minute money in, because all these people are paying too. That's the one thing that Line in the Sand, which you can find the links in the description to go watch, lays out, is that a lot of these people are paying like thousands and thousands of dollars, which blew me away. That they're paying thousands and thousands of dollars to get shuttled into the United States, to get brought all the way up here or snuck in or something like that. I mean, the amount of money that's involved is staggering. But you know, that the fact that they come here with thousands of dollars to spend on that's what do they? Where'd you get thousands of dollars from? You know,
migrants that are coming, that they think that things are going to change.
This Venezuelan migrant saying whoever wins should not close the doors to us and should give us support because we are all going through a bad time. He, like
I bet
so many others, fleeing an oppressive government and looking for a better future. New York.
Yeah, it ain't here though. It ain't here. You got to do it right. You can't just sneak into the country, break the law, and then start draining our resources, or we're going to turn into the same country you just left.
The city has spent more than $5 billion on the migrant crisis. The city projects combining the last 2 years, and this fiscal year, it's already spent $2.3 billion on just housing for migrants, with much of that going to hotels.
We know from the history of immigration enforcement in the interior that people are allowed to come into the United States under sometimes a specious asylum claim, and they don't want to be found by authorities after that. So previous to all these sanctuary cities in the United States, people who got arrested were the majority of people who were then deported. Now you're upwards of 10 million in the last 3 years. It's going to be a very difficult challenge.
Thousands are walking towards the border.
So as a large group of people treks towards the southern border, some are wondering if there's more going on here than meets the eye. But what nobody's talking about is this is the exact scenario leaders of sanctuary cities like New York have been dreading for months, because they've been doing victory laps lately, congratulating themselves on what a great job the city's done handling its asylum crisis. For example, in New York, about 4,000 people a week would arrive seeking shelter, and now that number is down to about 700, which makes it look like this crisis could be winding down. And this 75% reduction in arrivals mirrors the 78% reduction in border crossings achieved over the last few months. And even though this is a recent development, the reduction in asylum seekers has caused the city to begin tearing down some of its more controversial tent shelters, like the facility on Randall's Island, which was so large it could house around 3,000 people, but was so poorly run that gang members had taken it over and were using it as a base for their criminal operations. But gangs and shelters, that's only one of the many issues this large caravan full of people could possibly unbalance. And it certainly isn't the main issue the city's concerned about, because although most of the 212,000 asylum seekers who've come here did not do so to join gangs or live lives of crime, elected officials and activists welcomed them off buses into our shelter system with the promise of a new beginning which ends in 1 or 2 months after they get evicted because the shelters are over capacity. Plus, the job market for asylum seekers is so bad, many of them have no way to earn a living or rent apartments of their own and are now sadly living in tents down by the river.
Down by the river. And you know what the government says about that? Not our problem.
And even with this recent decline in border crossings, our shelter population is still sitting stagnant at around 60,000 individuals, revealing that, if anything, our asylum crisis here is far from over. But the real reason this large caravan full of individuals is of concern for our leaders here in New York is because if a whole bunch of new folks show up and we've torn down our shelters, we're just going to have to set them right back up, which could mean facilities like the violence-plagued Randall's Island shelter stay open for a lot longer than anyone had hoped, because New York's extremely generous right to housing requirement mandates that they give anyone who asks.
All those hotels, 1 in 5 hotels has migrants in New York City, And man, imagine how the conditions of those hotels at this point.
It's a place to stay. Something that's especially important for the thousands fleeing poverty south of our border right now, who, as you're about to see, are being deceived into believing that with the help of gang members and cartels, they too can have their shot at the American dream. And speaking of
Yep, it's a one big racket.
Cartels and gang members, they're earning so much money from the crisis at our border that they've got every reason to try and subvert recent security measures there. And by doing so, people will be forced to make their way to sanctuary cities like New York.
Yes, he bit a baby. Tried to eat it.
So with a large number of people on their way to the United States headed for the southern border, we could see a surge in arrivals at bus terminals like this in New York if people manage to use cartels and gangs to get them around recent restrictions that have been implemented over the last couple of months. And the reason these cartels and gang members have a new business opportunity on their hands is because the border is very different today than it was a year ago. Recently implemented restrictions means the number of daily allowed crossings is a lot lower than it used to be. And sadly, many folks in a very desperate situation can't wait indefinitely at the border. They're running low on resources and they're turning to the criminal underworld for faster passage into the country. And sadly, the criminal underworld doesn't want to lose money because of new restrictions from some government like the U.S. government. There's just too much money at stake for them.
So it's long been kind of this understanding of sorts that the Mexican cartel stays over in Mexico. They don't fire on or attack U.S. law enforcement because it's bad for business. But there has been basically a war within the Sinaloa cartel, and that prompted this alert that we actually obtained. That cartel operatives have actually...
So it unfortunately looks like things are about to get a lot more dangerous at the U.S. border because these cartels, there's recently been infighting among them, and the way that they handle U.S. law enforcement is about to change. Prior to this recent power struggle, the cartel was content to make money off smugglers and gang members accessing the border through its territory. But now, due to recent increased border security, the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agents, they're doing more, and they're also getting help from their counterparts in Mexico. So there's way more law enforcement along these routes than there used to be. And that is what's costing the bad guys a lot of money because they cannot fix.
Wouldn't Mexico be happy if we took out their cartels for
ferry people through the border around our restrictions so that they can then make their way wherever they'd like in the country? Now, the cartel in question here that is undergoing an internal factional dispute, it's the Sinaloa cartel, and that name might not mean much to you, but it's actually the same cartel that was being run by El Chapo, who we all remember, one of the most dangerous people on the planet. His sons took over after him, and now there's this internal squabbling over who should be in charge of this and who gets to control what territory. And unfortunately for our border guards, their lives are now at risk because some of the members fighting for control over this dangerous group want to change how they interact with law enforcement.
The number one reason they fight for these plazas is because these plazas are the corridors to enter the United States, whether California, Arizona, Mexico, Texas. And that's not just fighting for the plazas, but fighting for the leadership of both of these, which happens to be one cartel now basically.
So we're not just witnessing fighting over who gets to run this gang of criminals. We're also witnessing fighting over who controls access to the U.S. border in general. Because whoever controls access to the U.S. border, that's the gang. That's the group that's going to get paid when smugglers and other people want to access it. And I didn't know this, but apparently smuggling people into the country, it's a $13 billion a year industry. That's a lot. And that explains a lot why these cartels are so well funded and so heavily armed and so dangerous. They're making billions off of this every single year. And now the fear is that a reaction to increased border restrictions and an upcoming presidential transition period may cause many people to think that this is their last chance to enter the country, and there might be a surge of activity at the border that these cartels are going to take advantage of. And look at this, these cartels are actually using drone disruptors to blind Border Patrol agents while they're trying to keep people safe and secure the border at the same time. This is a very sophisticated operation they've got going on. It's almost like a paramilitary group operating right there on the very outskirts of America's doorstep, offering people their chance to come into the country and achieve something not possible in the dangerous places many of them have fled. And now the fear is that if these criminals decide to turn their full attention against the U.S. border right now while it's in a state of flux, all of the recent security gains and victories that have recently been achieved could be in jeopardy.
That's right, dude. And that's what's going on there. Surge at the last minute surge. And like I said, it's a big money racket. So I mean they're cashing in as they do it. Right? It's abuse. It's abuse at the highest levels. And our government's complicit in it. This corrupt establishment's complicit in it. We're gonna take it back. We're going to change this. We're going to seal the border. We're going to get the people out that need to get out. We're going to make it right. We're going to disassemble all of this corruption and this racket from it's all going to go down. And we're going to keep an eye on it, make sure it does too. And where we need to speak out about it, we'll speak out about it. All right. So T-Rex, we're going to help T-Rex here today. We're going to help T-Rex understand what happened here. As Biden has lost his mind once again, and he has bitten a baby. Tonight, Joe Biden caught sucking a baby's foot and biting another baby's leg at the White House an hour ago. So why do people let their kids near this guy? Why do they do it? mean, these people are insane. These are probably the people that are pimping their kids out. Look at that. Can you guys see that? Look how disgusting that is. Yeah. How dare you let that creepy old pedo near your kids? Yeah. I'm gonna put my old man saliva on your foot. And I hope that makes him sick. I hope that makes him sick. Disgusting. Disgusting. And here he is actually taking a bite out of a baby's leg. This is not, hey, what's up, nerd? How you doing? This is not AI. This is not Photoshop. This is for real. He's biting babies. He's biting babies. Never bite a baby that isn't yours. That's right. Look at this. Right, guys, can you believe this? What are these people thinking? I'm like, no. You can look at the baby from a distance, but you're not going to put your mouth on the baby. I mean, these people, these are clueless people. Have you not seen the videos of what he does to children? Have you not seen the videos of what he does to children? I mean, it's their legacy. They've been going on forever. Yeah, there you go. That's the person all the TDS mind control victims put into office. They voted for this. They voted for this right here. This is what they love. They love this. And people that are voting for Kamala, they love this too and more. They want more of this. They love it. They love it. They love it. They probably do it themselves, and it's disgusting. Disgusting. Same people that are out there yelling at kids, hitting kids, doing, that are, this. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. Yep. Thank God we only have a little bit of time left with that old mummy in charge. And off he goes. Off he goes. All right. So border crisis done. Let's do this next. Let's see. Make sure I got winning speed. Now we tried to start this the other night, but I felt like there was too much distractions going on, so I wanted to save it because it's important. Herman, the tosser, what's up? I heard he shapeshifts into some wide-mouthed lizard and eats the kids behind the scenes. He did. Yeah, he probably does. Chosen ones. He definitely needs someone. He definitely needs some Jesus, that's for sure. He definitely needs some Jesus. He's finally lost what was left of his mind. Not really. Poor old man. Not really. Yeah, I agree. Not really. Yeah. All right. All right. So, guys, let me just say this as I pull this on screen here. Remember that day in the life of Harry Dunn? We did part 1, and part 2 is out. And we started to watch it the other night, and it needs to have, we had a distraction. So that's why I usually don't tolerate distractions when we're in show, right? It's just people wanting attention. They want attention. They want bad attention. They think they're doing something and they're not. It's sad. It's really sad. I feel my problem is that I feel sorry for these mind control victims. I really do. And I think it's the right thing to do is to feel sorry for them. But, we got to do what we got to do here. And that is stay informed and stay on top of the real truth that's out there. So this is a special report. The official story is crumbling. And this investigation is surfacing those facts. Witnesses are speaking out tonight. We're going to pull back the curtain on one of the biggest political deceptions in American history. The truth about January 6th is hiding in plain sight. And the day in the life of Harry Dunn, part 2, the Oath Keepers, the truth about January 6th from Blaze TV. This is blazing the trail, if you will, and letting us see what's going on in places that the mainstream media will never cover. Hey, Lady Adam Sky, how you doing?
Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn on seeking the full truth.
The first officer to speak out after the riot.
I'm telling my truth and my story. It was fighting back insurrectionists. Fighting on January 6th, that was hard. This guy sounds like Jussie Smollett. This guy lies about everything.
We will never forget Officer Harry Dunn, who fought against the violent mob for hours.
He never went to the basement. Nothing Harry described about that meeting ever took place that morning. Harry Dunn would lose it on occasion. He dropped his rifles magazine.
Since the insurrection, you've testified before Congress in the Oath Keepers trial.
If you looked at me wrong that day, I want you to go to jail for the rest of your life.
Yes, we did. It was an awesome interview.
Had more than a
Gary's
decade's
awesome.
worth
We
of
talked till
spotless
5 in the
records.
morning.
Oath keepers.
The Oath Keepers.
The Oath Keepers.
Behind
among
the
them
scenes.
Current and former military, ex-military, and law enforcement officers who claim to keep the peace at potentially violent events.
The Department of Justice has charged leaders of the Oath Keepers with seditious conspiracy to overthrow the government of the United States.
Yeah, that's bullshit. The Oath Keepers. Remember I told you about the Oath Keepers? I told you about the Oath Keepers original, how they started. They started as protection for the Ron Paul revolution from crazy leftists and agitators put in there by the establishment, the feds, and all that stuff. Because they're retired sheriffs. They're all sheriffs. They all taken the oath to the Constitution. That's why they're the Oath Keepers. That's where the name comes from. Oath Keepers. They're retired sheriffs. So these are people that have been defending the Constitution, state to state, throughout their careers, and that's what they were doing. That's the Oath Keepers. That's the origins of them. That's where I know them from. And they were the original kind of like, peacekeepers, if you will, to keep people from attacking Ron Paul supporters. So these guys have always had a special place and in this grassroots revolution, anti-establishment revolution against the corrupt establishment. So, the idea that they're being painted this way is just totally ridiculous, right? Like people can't go find out their history and whatnot, that they're actually sheriffs or retired sheriffs, current sheriffs, law enforcement. They're law enforcement. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they did. They started that long ago. That's where they came from. Yep, Stuart Rhodes, way back in the day. That's where the name comes from. Keeping their oath to the Constitution. That's what it is. That's what it is. So, anyways, yeah, when people come out and trash it and try to say there's something that they're not, I always have to correct it really fast because that's total BS. They're constitutional sheriffs, is what they are.
Specifically involved in that case.
He has come up multiple times in this case.
They lied under oath.
I'm just going to go for it. And
Yes, very
I'm
much.
going to hold back.
Very much, Nacho.
Were the Oath Keepers framed?
He's got Stuart Rhodes on right here, I guess. Yep.
We got shots fired. Shots have been fired up. And we're so prepared to fire back at them.
You think they got a fair trial? I'm concerned with the outcome. They couldn't get a fair trial here. Do you think it's very fair? Not fair.
The founder of the Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes, was found guilty of seditious conspiracy.
The Oath Keepers were found guilty of crimes related to the Capitol attack.
There is no way to overstate just how important and historic this trial was.
The Department of Justice invested a lot of resources in making sure.
Yeah, they've been wanting to get it for a long time.
The verdict will likely bolster the confidence of the Justice Department.
Sentenced to 4 years in prison.
Sentenced to 8.5 years in prison.
Sentenced to 12 years in prison. Sentenced to 18 years in prison.
Stuart Rhodes.
Today, there was dramatic testimony from
horrifying.
Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn. Lawyers for Stuart Rhodes and 4 other members of the Oath Keepers on trial have suggested that the group helped Officer Harry Dunn. Dunn just took the stand and said flat out, quote, they didn't.
Dunn's stated recollection of the event when he met and encountered those Oath Keepers actually, it's very different depending upon the telling and where you read about it.
I don't conflate my story.
Now, he says in his book, at his trial testimony, that when I first got to the stairwell, I noticed 2 officers. One who was in plain clothes, and that would be Special Agent David Lazarus. And then he also says, and another female officer, a friend of mine, Tanisha Ford. He said that there were 2 officers standing there that were being hassled by protesters. I immediately started talking to the rioters to distract them from Lazarus and Ford. I was thinking, y'all come over and with me. I was standing in the spot where the Oath Keepers would lie during their trial later and say they defended me. They didn't defend me.
Officer Dunn told the jury about physically
This guy
blocking
is
a
the
group of Oath
biggest
Keepers from
shell.
getting to Nancy Pelosi's office.
He has come up
Such a
multiple
liar.
times in this case because defense attorneys have sought to build this narrative that when the Oath Keepers went in, because
This
there's
guy's a
video captured of
power-hungry
the Oath Keepers
liar.
interacting with Dunn, they were there to
Useful-
help him. Prosecutors asked him point blank, Erica, if anybody offered assistance. He said absolutely not.
So in May of 21, Dunn was called in for his first FBI interview. And in that interview, Dunn says that he allowed the Oath Keepers to stand in front of him to keep protesters off of him. He was then brought in again to the FBI. This was in an August of 21 interview. And then he said that the Oath Keepers were not protecting him. In fact, that he was having to hold them back from going down the stairs. There was an
Does it look like he's holding him back right there?
Attempt to suppress some evidence. And the evidence that was being suppressed was the potential release of 2 FBI interviews, what they call 302 forms.
Blaze Media acquired access to 2 FBI 302 interview forms. They're marked unclassified. However, they're under the court's protective order, preventing them from being made public.
One officer had provided his accounting of what happened to him that day on January 6th about his encounter with the Oath Keepers. And it was a positive telling of his encounter with the Oath Keepers, that in fact, they lined up in front of him. They protected him. They held back more adjutant members of the riotous crowd from him. Except that when they started putting together the case against the Oath Keepers, that had to be changed. Right. So they brought him in for a second interview. That testimony was not only changed to a contentious encounter with the Oath Keepers, but then they also created another event in another part of the building to say that he misremembered and he was confusing the two.
I don't conflate my story.
I saw a scared guy standing there with an M4 rifle, and my first thought was, this guy's, something's going to escalate. Yeah, my name's Sergeant Kenneth Harrelson, U.S. Army retired. I'm married to my wonderful wife. We have 4 kids. You know, just a good old country boy from Florida.
Another Oath Keeper, Kenneth Harrelson, sentenced to 4 years in prison.
There was something going on down the hallway. So Joe, he kind of went down to investigate to see what was going on. And he come back and he grabbed me by the sleeve of my shirt and he said, "Hey man, there's a bunch of protesters down here around this police officer, and they're going back and forth. They're yelling and screaming at each other, and he's holding a rifle, and it looks like things could kind of get out of hand."
He was freaking out. I mean, he was screaming. Ken Harrelson, one of the other Oath Keepers, walked around the corner. He's like, "Sir, calm down. What's going on?" He's like, "They're killing us down here, man. They're taking us out on stretchers."
He was in a heated
political argument
with these protesters, telling them that
Lies.
they were trying to silence his vote and that he voted for Joe Biden. He said, "I can't let you guys go down these stairs." And they said, "Well, if you don't let us pass you to go down the stairs, we're going to drag you out of here, out of the building with the politicians." And he said, "I will take as many of you out as I can before you get to me." And that's when I stepped forward. And I said, whoa, you know what? What are you doing?
So Ken calmed him down for a second and then came and got me, and he went back and we stood in front of Harry Dunn for almost 6 minutes.
I was walking back from the House chamber, which is, the area where Ashley Babbitt was shot.
He had his phone or camera going the whole time.
And when I walked in, this encounter was already taking place. And so what I saw was, one officer by himself. He had a rifle. This was Officer Dunn, and he looked like he was about ready to start shooting people. And then you had other members of the crowd who were shouting at him. And between those two sides is these men in militia gear. These were the Oath Keepers, but they were trying to calm things down between these two sides.
Gear.
And so I did not witness the whole encounter because I did not stick around in that room for very long. I didn't want to get, hit by a stray bullet.
Harry Dunn participated in several congressional hearings. He testified and observed in some of the 1,265 cases against January 6 defendants. He testified during the Oath Keepers seditious conspiracy trial in 2022.
It's important to note that leading up to the Oath Keepers trial, Harry Dunn was coached extensively before he even took the stand. Now, in his book, this is what he writes. He says that the Justice Department attorney helped me tell my story. A good witness is truthful and consistent. But Harry Dunn is everything but consistent. In the trial, he was asked, "Is it fair to say that you represented to the FBI that you allowed these people to stand in front of you to help keep the protesters from going down the stairs?" Dunn responded, "Not in this location that you have seen on the screen. You also told agents early on that you had allowed these Oath Keepers to stand in front of you. Do you recall saying that?" Dunn says, "Yes. The event where I allowed individuals to stand in front of me was in the crypt, the stairwell leading down to the lower west terrace." But then there's a second interview where there was a second interaction that occurred upstairs in front of the speaker's office. Is that correct? Dunn says that's correct. Under cross-examination from attorney Bradford Geyer, Dunn was asked, "Now, you are aware that the Oath Keepers, based on the best government evidence, never were down in the crypt or down on that floor?" Dunn says, "To my understanding." Geyer then asks, "Okay, so when you say that the Oath Keepers, or in your first interview when you said that you allowed Oath Keepers to stand in front of you and protect you, is your testimony still that this occurred downstairs in the crypt?" The Oath Keepers were never in the crypt. They never went down to that level of the building. And Geyer was trying to give Dunn the opportunity to reconcile this. Maybe this story that you're telling down here where you allowed guys to stand in front of you, maybe that was what happened upstairs with the Oath Keepers. But Dunn was firm. He wouldn't let go. He had been well coached on how to reconcile the differences between those two FBI interviews.
And I don't conflate my story.
He stuck to his story that upstairs was nothing but an antagonistic, highly confrontational interaction with those real Oath Keepers. And then the other group of kind of looked like Oath Keepers was the event where he allowed them to stand in front of him. Except we have 3 cameras in the crypt. There were no Oath Keeper-like people in the crypt at that time.
If you disagree with what happened, then I don't know what to tell you. It's always important to tell the truth and be honest about what happened. These things called Harryisms.
We have obvious lies, exaggerations, mischaracterizations throughout the day, from the morning until the evening. But for some reason, Harry, the press, the DOJ, the FBI, they all want us to believe that his story about the Oath Keepers is correct.
Seems straightforward to me, Harry Dunn.
His powerful testimony laid bare the day's facts for history.
We have him dead to rights just from the trial transcript alone. He says that he comes to the top of the stairs. He sees 2 officers there. He said, "This is the first time I've seen Special Agent David Lazarus all day." Except the problem was, as we've already proved,
I'm pretty sure he
our
led
story back in October of last year, is that David Lazarus was in another building when Harry Dunn arrived at the top of those stairs. Lazarus can be seen moving away from the Capitol building through a lower tunnel at 2:37:59 p.m. Lazarus can be seen moving back toward the Capitol at 2:45 p.m. Dunn's encounter with the Oath Keepers began at 2:44 and lasted roughly between 5 and 6 minutes. Lazarus finally emerges from the tunnel back to the Senate side of the Capitol building at 2:48. He also said that his friend, an officer by the name of Tanisha Ford, was standing in front of the stairwell. It's a winding staircase directly on the other side of the small rotunda. We were facing each other. If I was facing the wing, she was facing me, and she had her back towards the stairwell, and she was being accosted also. This also never happened. From trial discovery in another trial, we found video of the moment when Harry Dunn arrives at the top of the steps at 2:44 p.m. This one particular January 6th defendant walks over and with his camera, he actually videos down the stairwell, and then he does a 360 kind of around the whole thing, and we see that she's not there. Harry Dunn testified numerous times and even wrote in his book that when he arrived at the top of the stairs, he looked up and he saw Nancy Pelosi's sign above the door. I guess those idiots didn't see it, speaking of the Oath Keepers. I guess those idiots didn't see it because by the time that he arrived at 2:44 p.m. at the top of that staircase, that sign had already been torn down about 10 minutes earlier. His testimony was false. He didn't see it. And then it was contradicted by Officer Lazarus because he talks about how when he arrived at the top of that same staircase, he looked up and noticed that the sign had been knocked down. Their testimonies were back to back on October 31st of 2022. Harry said in his testimony, because he was first up that morning, that when he arrived to the top of that staircase in the small rotunda, that was the first time he saw David Lazarus. And then when David Lazarus testified, he said when he ran up to the top of the stairs was this super recognizable big figure, the big 6'7", 300+ pound Harry Dunn already at the top of the stairs. The 2 of those stories couldn't be true. They brought in this guy from Nancy Pelosi's Dignitary Protection Detail and had him claim in trial, in the transcripts, that he passed by that interaction between Officer Dunn and the Oath Keepers 3 or 4 times. That's exactly what he said in the trial, except it never happened.
He was then shown in court a video clip of 4 Oath Keepers standing in front of Dunn. Lazarus was asked, "Are these the individuals you observed?" Yes, yes. At any point in these 3 or 4 interactions in this space, did you observe any sort of anything but antagonistic conversation? No, that's correct. He said this under oath.
Were the Oath Keepers framed? Lee?
I don't know that I would use the term framed, but I do believe that somewhere behind closed doors, it took a while, took a lot of minds meeting together to figure out how to get them. And I think the DOJ was very clever and very ingenious of how they put the pieces together to try and get them all. The idea of this explicit conspiracy that they had built up prior to the indictment fell apart. Well, that's when it dropped down, and well, it was an implicit conspiracy. I absolutely think that this was a setup. I think it was part of a political narrative, and it played out, unfortunately, I think exactly as the government intended it for it to.
We don't have like definitive evidence of what happened when Harry Dunn and the Oath Keepers.
I think we do, but it's being ignored.
Why do you think we do?
We have photography of them standing the line in front of him, backs to him, hands out, pushing people away. I mean, and we have his original testimony that he gave to the FBI. I mean, his original testimony was, yeah, I allowed them to stand a line in front of me, between me and the protesters. It's pretty damn positive evidence, if you ask me.
Do you think that Harry Dunn and David Lazarus could have to answer in court?
I'm certain that it's false testimony.
We know that David Lazarus, Special Agent David Lazarus, and Officer Harry Dunn did not come up with these stories about the Oath Keepers on their own. Somebody suborned that perjury from both of them. Somebody coached them. Somebody wrote this.
I know you want to talk about Harry Dunn, David. He went to the courtroom for the verdicts. He told the Washington Post that he was emotional. He didn't expect to cry, but he was emotional.
This is the big one, because let's just call it for what it is. The Department of Justice, they threw everything at the Oath Keepers. They called them the tip of the spear. They pointed, the lead prosecutor, Jeffrey Nessler, pointed at those 5 defendants in that first trial. I know, I was sitting in the courtroom when he did it. And he said that they were the leaders of the insurrection. They were the tip of the spear. Except that when the first breaches happened, they weren't even on the property yet. And so you ask me why this is important? It's important because this is the fulcrum, the dividing line between truth and reality related to January 6th. That moment at 2:44 p.m. because Harry Dunn did not come up with this story on his own.
We must be absolutely clear about what is true and what is a lie.
That's the part I think that makes me the most bitter, is that I know now there's evidence out there that we didn't get, whether it because of the J6 committee, because we couldn't get a continuance to get past the sunset of I think, December 1st, 2022 of the committee, and then McCarthy releasing the tapes in January of 23. I think that part makes me bitter.
And this is why the House Judiciary Committee needs to address this. They need to launch,
and why we have to get uncorrupt government,
these 2 officers' testimonies, and find out who put them up
do this
to the tale that they told. Get them under oath. Let's find out who put them up to these perjuries.
Yes. All right. Part 2.
These things called isms.
Part 3 is coming. There we go. All right. So that's part 2 of A Day in the Life of Harry Dunn, a deeper dive into the J6 event and the false narrative of the corrupt establishment. There you have it. Amazing, isn't it? That's, again, if we don't get government with integrity, if we don't get Trump in the White House, we'll never, ever be able to do anything about this. That's why it's so important that we get out and vote, and that we get other people to get out and vote and do anything we can. Show them stuff like this, stuff like that report right there. Show them the line in the sand, and whatever you think can get through to somebody before they vote. You got, let's see, Thursday, tonight, got tomorrow, 1, 2, 3, you got 5 days, 5 days to do it, 5 days to do it. Let me hear about what you guys are, if you've had any successes in the chat. Talk about any successes that you have had in reaching out to people and getting them to see the light and maybe make the right choice on election day. Hopefully make the right choice on election day. Oh man, so much. Let me see where we're gonna go next here. Where we're gonna go next? Well, let's see. Talk about this. Let me get this queued up. Since we're on the investigative track right now. Coming from the O'Keefe Media Group. Let me get it queued up and we'll be ready to go here. Breaking news. Just out today. Oops. Let's see right there. Go like that. All right. Breaking news, special segment. FEMA whistleblower. When disaster struck, Americans needed help. Instead, they got bureaucracy and broken promises. Tonight, a FEMA insider risks everything to expose the truth about hurricane response failures. This is more than a story of mismanagement. It's a warning about what happens when government forgets its purpose.
My name is Kelsey Goodman. I'm here to blow the whistle on FEMA. There are still people that are missing. Rivers that were existing before have now turned into lakes. There are still communities without power, without water, without access to cell phones or internet. You can go on the FEMA website. The number one goal of FEMA is to instill equity in emergency management. It's not to save lives. It's not to create stronger communities that will weather future disasters. It's to instill equity.
It almost feels like I'm being asked to give my opinion on equity to the state, and I am not comfortable at all doing that.
Right now, we ask that you do it. You tell us how you did it, and
I saw that, T-Rex.
Until you get further instructions.
Tell us your exact title.
I am a hazard mitigation emergency manager.
And what is your job description? What are your job duties there?
I work with the states to help them implement long-term recovery strategies in order to keep the disasters, the loss of life and property from happening during future disasters.
I showed you a little clip from the film Line in the Sand where Zachary had his moment where he couldn't take it anymore. Talk to us about what was your line in the sand moment working for FEMA?
FEMA seemed to be very overwhelmed by the disaster, the size of the disaster and the scope, which took me off guard. There was a lot of frustration, questions on the ground from homeowners. It was getting out in the media, social media, of locals in the disaster areas asking where FEMA is, why aren't they coming to help? And there was a lot of information being put out by FEMA leadership that was really creating a bit of an echo chamber with us as employees, saying FEMA's not doing anything wrong. They were sending us emails internally telling us that it was people being homophobic or anti-Semitic or whatever it was. FEMA was doing a great job.
Now, you've shared internal FEMA photos with us from boots on the ground in Asheville. Talk about what it was like for you witnessing all of that devastation firsthand.
I haven't witnessed it firsthand. I haven't been to Asheville. I'd say a majority of the staff deployed to North Carolina hasn't been to Asheville.
They haven't been to Asheville. Wow.
That's why you hear a lot of homeowners saying, we don't see FEMA. Where is FEMA? We don't see them. But contrast, you hear FEMA leadership say, we have 1,000 people on the ground. We have 900 people on the ground. That's where the disconnect is.
And getting back to the reason why you're sitting down with us, there was a noticeable shift in the way FEMA handles funding opportunities, something called BRIC. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, there are annual appropriations from Congress for different disaster funding sources. So the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities.
That's BRIC.
That's BRIC. It's an annual grant program, and it's nationally competitive. It allows for all the states and local governments and the federally recognized tribes to submit project applications in order to strengthen their communities. Over the last several years, since 2021 we have changed the priorities in terms of how we're awarding that money. There are higher priorities given to different racial groups, different minority groups, and it's really creating internal confusion as to how we're awarding this money.
How does that work, though? If you have a higher disadvantaged status, why should that make a difference if whether FEMA goes into a community to help people?
So when Joe Biden came in office, he signed Executive Order 14008, and that basically said that we need to give minorities and disadvantaged communities priority over historical communities that had not received discrimination in the past. Through that came what was called the Justice 40 Initiative, and it said that 40% of certain grant funding needed to go to these quote unquote disadvantaged communities.
How does FEMA determine which communities get what grants?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that anybody really knows the answer to that. They have created different tools over the last few years in order to determine what they call disadvantaged community status.
Would you say Asheville is in the situation they're in with Helene because this grant was denied?
I don't know.
Sounds like DEI.
I don't know when grants are denied, especially under these nationally competitive programs, there's no way to tell why they're denied and why they
other
aren't.
cultural Marxist ideas.
Christianity and a long-standing policy to bar houses of worship from receiving FEMA disaster funds. Can you talk about that?
Within the last few years, when the new guidance was put out in 2023, it was decided that houses of worship were no longer eligible for certain disaster funding. I spoke with my supervisors. They said it's written in guidance. That's what we have to abide by. If you want to reach out to legal counsel, you're more than welcome. But in terms of helping them to withstand things in the future, that they were no longer eligible for that. And I have not been able to understand why or get a response as to why. We are prioritizing the wrong things. We are prioritizing disadvantaged communities when there's no clear definition of what that is. We're prioritizing DEI initiatives and climate change initiatives. Most of it is going to be based on
like a
the racial makeup.
The racial makeup. But the race doesn't necessarily correlate to economic. There's not a direct correlation between race and economic disadvantage.
FEMA might disagree.
FEMA might disagree.
You can go on the FEMA website. The number one goal of FEMA is to instill equity in emergency management. It's not to save lives.
There it is. Look at this. This is all the subversion of Agenda 2030. People think it's not a big deal. They're not talking about it as much. Need to talk about it more. This is right off their website and their agenda. This is it creeping into our government, creeping into our lives, overriding our culture, and in parallel constructing their future right around us in plain sight.
It's not to create stronger communities that will weather future disasters. It's to instill equity. So in terms of why one community is chosen over another, we have no way of knowing, and neither do the communities.
Talk to us about any training FEMA put you through, specifically the DEI portion.
So FEMA over the last few years has really been big on instilling equity in emergency management.
What does that mean, equity?
Well, I asked the exact same question and I was never given an answer.
It almost feels like I'm being asked to give my opinion on equity to the state, and I am not comfortable at all doing that.
Right now, we ask that you do it. You tell us how you did it. And the guidance is the guidance until you get further instructions. And right now, there's no measurement to determine what's good and what's bad, right? This is what the grand guidance says. We ask you to do this. You show us where you did this, and we move on.
A lot of people that do this, whistleblowers, have their own reasons for coming forward, and many have fears. Are you afraid of retaliation from FEMA for sitting here and talking about all this?
No, they may retaliate, they may not, but it was just too much for me to sit and listen to it all and not respond.
What was your breaking point?
There was a lot in the immediate aftermath of Helene. A lot of people on social media videoing themselves stranded in North Carolina in different areas. They weren't seeing FEMA. They couldn't find anyone for help. There was no money being handed out. The $750 payment was being denied to a lot of people who were requesting it. It occurred to me then that nothing was going to change, that we were being lied to in terms of how we're handling these disasters. We're not doing better, we're doing worse, and something needs to change. We're getting our overtime every day, and there are people just dying.
So it's about money?
I think it might be about money. I think this is a very lucrative place to work, especially in a disaster. I had somebody in Kentucky earlier this year show me pictures of his beach house in Portugal that he was going to buy with all the overtime money he makes in disaster work. You only have so many resources available. You only have so much time available. And when you're dedicating that time and those resources to things that you can't tie to fact, we've gotten away from common sense. This agency has the capacity to be a really good agency. We have the ability to do really good things for the country. Storms are real. They do not discriminate. A storm is going to hit a white neighborhood just as easy as it will hit a black neighborhood or a Hispanic neighborhood. The more we start separating ourselves based on these metrics that don't matter to a tornado, they don't matter to a hurricane, we're just creating issues.
Do you think FEMA should be abolished?
I think the work that FEMA does, people don't truly understand. The people in Asheville and the people in these declared areas, they don't see FEMA because that's not FEMA's job. FEMA is not searching the rivers for bodies. They're not clearing debris. They're not flying the helicopters. We're here to give money and to write checks, to work in offices in the Capitol, and to coordinate. I don't understand why the states couldn't do that just as well, if not better than we could.
Yeah, because they're giving your tax dollars to this agency instead of to flying helicopters around and picking up bodies.
And we're making people jump through a lot of hoops to get a small portion of that money back.
You mentioned the reason you're not afraid. You felt...
I think when you believe in the Lord, you have faith in his plan. It may not always go the way you want it to. I have no idea what my future is with the agency, if there will be retaliation or not, but I felt that he was calling me to do something and to speak the truth. And so it's my job to be obedient to him.
How you doing, Jay, man? It's good to meet you.
What's happening
Good to
inside
see
that
you.
facility? You know what's happening? They all protect each other. The NGOs. They got the spotlight on us. The federal government. This is dangerous. I don't think we can trust anybody. America, we made it. The king of the world.
Follow the journey of the immigrants.
I can't do this, guys.
The journey of the children.
Oh, this is big time. We're in a cartel tunnel now, dog. We're in a cartel tunnel.
And the journey into human nature. Some things can't be read in a book or a newspaper. They must instead be lived.
There's nobody here to stop this.
There you go. And you can watch that right now. Links in the description. Just follow those links. The BitChute link was the documentary only, and there's 2 stream links from when I streamed it. That you can have an additional documentary, the Muckraker U.S. Southern Border Invasion Route documentary, where they actually went from Ecuador to the southern border and showed all of the globalist NGOs and all this, the UN, everybody that's involved in this great scam that's going on, this invasion of our border. And like I said, this is the line in the sand is an instant red pill for people. If you just want to send them the documentary, use the BitChute link and you can watch it immediately. It may change some votes. You can be part of the solution. Good to see J-Man, dude. Good to see you, man. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. All right. Let's see what we up to right now. Let me take this down here. Let's see. Oh yeah. Again, more special reports. We're in the special report territory here. I didn't list this one out, but this one came out a little bit later, and I wanted to give Peter Navarro a chance to talk about this John Kelly guy, right? He was on in the Trump administration in 2016 with this guy, and he calls him a bully, a coward, and a traitor. And this guy was literally undermining Trump the entire time. We know that Trump's going to do a lot better with his picks this time. He's learned a lot. There we go. And let me just roll that back. Okay, yeah. And so Navarro went on Blaze TV and did a piece about that, and he is going to tell us all about this John Kelly guy. You hear so much about him now. Like all Trump's administrators, the people that were with him, respected generals and such, say he's a threat. He's all these things, right? These people are flat out liars. They were undermining him the whole time. They're breaking their oath to the commander in chief as well. And Peter Navarro lays it all out. Let's take a look.
Was there a traitor in the Trump administration? In a recent piece for Blaze News, Peter Navarro, who's the former director of the White House National Trade Council, argued that John Kelly, who's Trump's former chief of staff, was, quote, a bullying coward. So here to discuss with me is Blaze editor-in-chief, Matthew Peterson, and Peter Navarro himself. So Peter, let's get right into it. So why was Kelly a traitor within the Trump administration?
He was a coward, bully, and a traitor. He was a 4-star general who refused to obey repeatedly the commander-in-chief of this country that was duly elected by the American people. It seems to me in the military, the first rule is obey the chain of command. Now, nobody knows Kelly better than I. I served with him for over 500 days, and it was painful because he was a bully, but he also would interfere with key aspects of the Trump agenda. And I'll be very specific about this. A lot of the things that Trump wanted to do on the trade agenda involve things like setting tariffs on steel and aluminum or on China. We did buy American, hire American orders. And I would see repeatedly in the Oval Office, we'd be in there with the trade team, Kelly would be in there. And at the end of the discussion, it would be, all right, Kelly, let's get this done, whatever it might have been. And it was supposed to be done the next day. And sometimes weeks would go by before the president would say, hey, where's my tariff or where's this? And Kelly would, and he'd bury stuff. And he'd do it because he was under the mistaken belief that he was the elected president, not President Trump. And I mean, it boggles the mind that a 4-star general who knows the importance of the chain of command would do that. And that's, to me, if he were in the military and did that, he would be court-martialed. And the act is of treason when you betray your commander in chief. That's the case against John Kelly. And look, he never should have been put in as chief of staff. He just, look, in the military, I love folks in the military. They really lay their life down. But he was a fish out of water in the White House. He walks in with these high IQ Wall Street guys and other people.
I got to see him in
the
Duluth.
sharpest people in the shed. And he was always the dumbest guy in the room. And he was terrible with the media. There was just nothing about him that had any appeal. He did tremendous damage. And the last thing he's done now, bully, coward, traitor, election interferer. He's got no business talking that kind of smack and trash 2 weeks out before an election to a left-wing publication like The Atlantic.
Peter, I cannot tell you how much I appreciated reading this article. Your candor and honesty are very much appreciated here, and I think our readers, our entire audience appreciates what you said as well. Unlike you, I only saw him once in the White House, wander into a room towards the end and seemed like a very angry and confused person. But can you tell us a little bit about Kelly and what he represents? Because he's basically said this publicly. I mean, he thought he was saving the White House and the country from Trump. And everyone needs to understand that there were people like him, right? I mean, the reasoning that he had was, oh, well, I'm saving the country from the president while working for him.
Yeah. And I really appreciate the Blaze for publishing my article. He did a beautiful job production-wise. Kelly was of a type in the White House. There were the three generals, McMaster, there was Mattis over at the Pentagon, there was Kelly. They had this globalist view, for example, with respect to the trade agenda, that you couldn't, for example, go after South Korea to redo their trade deal, even though it was killing our auto industry, because they didn't want to disturb the military alliance. Now, what they didn't understand was a couple of things. One is that if we allow South Korea or Japan to destroy our automobile industry, when push comes to shove, we're not going to have the defense industrial base in order to defend ourselves and them. That's number one. And number two, they didn't understand the beauty of Trump. It's like we're playing with a strong bargaining hand. We could go to South Korea, and we did this successfully, and say, hey, that's a bad deal for us. We're renegotiating. He can hold their feet to the fire without endangering the alliances. And the idea that those three generals, or Gary Cohn at the National Economic Council, Wall Street Goldman Sachs guy, or Rex Tillerson, the Exxon guy at the Department of State, somehow thought that they knew better than Trump when Trump had been successfully elected on a MAGA platform on bringing our manufacturing back home was just wrong. I mean, the original sin of all of this was to appoint any of those clowns to begin with. I'm sure that President Trump will get it right the second term, but I'm telling you, it was tough. Nobody would have bet on this. I won only three people that survived all 4 years plus the campaign with Donald Trump. And I got more done in 4 years than Kamala Harris did. I'll put my record on that. But my point is simply that those first couple of years, and that was hand-to-hand combat with people like Kelly. I mean, he tried to fire. I was there with him 510 days. He probably tried to fire me 509 of them because I never took any of his crap. The other thing, I didn't even get a chance to talk about this much, but he's like Captain Queeg, if you know that. He would like eavesdrop on the president's conversations at night. The president loves to get on the phone at night. That's kind of his thing. Like, he talks to whoever he needs to talk. That's how he formulates ideas and comes to the great conclusions he so often does. And Kelly was afraid that Trump would be talking to people and, oh my gosh, he shouldn't be talking, whatever. So he'd do that, and then he'd read the phone logs to see if people like me had made any calls to the president. And he tried to enforce this rule on Trump where he tried to exclude people from him instead of, as Corey Lewandowski once said, letting Trump be Trump. And it was just doomed to failure. There's a poignant moment in my In Trump Time book where I write about the final days of Kelly. We're sitting in Buenos Aires, Argentina at the G20, and we're sitting at a dinner table across from the Chinese delegation. Trump's in the center, head-to-head with Xi Jinping, right? And Kelly's a broken man by that point, and he's like days away from leaving. And he turns to me and apologizes for what he did to me. And he said that he got it wrong, that he didn't realize I was one of the good guys, and the Gary Cohns of this world who had basically wrapped them around their fingers were the ones who were really the toxic ones. And if he had understood that from the beginning and cast his lot in with the Trump people instead of the interlopers like Gary Cohn and Mattis and Tillerson and those people, he would have done possibly a good job. If he had stayed at Homeland Security, he probably would have been a success. He just had no business at the White House, and he did tremendous damage. And now he's trying to stop Donald Trump from getting a second term, and that should piss everybody off.
Peter, before we get to this election, this time around, the 2020 election, we all know revolved around Hunter Biden and his laptop. And earlier today, a great reporter, Catherine Herridge, came out on X and said, of course, the feds knew what was happening. The IRS, the DOJ, and the FBI all knew that Hunter Biden's laptop was real immediately. And they said that prosecutors demanded that they not ask questions about Joe Biden ahead of the 2020 election. Yeah. So what's your take? Does any of this surprise you at all?
No, look, the FBI put me in leg irons, took me down at an airport for a misdemeanor where the protocol is, hey, Navarro, we got a warrant for you. Would you mind reporting down to the court? Okay. No, they are the Federal Bureau of Intimidation. They went after Trump with automatic rifles, me with handguns. It's like, that is a broken agency. That is an agency that needs to be dismantled and built from the ground back up. Look, we know that if the people of America had known what was in that laptop, they would have voted more for Donald Trump, and that alone would have been enough to sway the election. So what the FBI engaged in was election interference. And what's amazes me, like the left, they call us, for example, fascists and authoritarians. Like, I went to prison, Bannon went to prison, Rudy Giuliani's bankrupt because of them, John Clark and John Eastman lost their bar cards because of them, and they want to put Donald Trump in prison for 700 years. And don't forget, if Kamala wins, they'll do that. And it's just like, and then they say we interfere with elections, and they do this kind of stuff. I mean, that's egregious. I think what we don't need retribution. What we need is accountability. And the people who were involved at the FBI and the Russia hoax and in the Hunter Biden laptop suppression, and some of these legislators like Schiff and Swalwell, who repeatedly lied to the American public, and then the 20 or so intelligence, let's put that in air quotes, intelligence officers who said that the laptop was a Russia hoax too. Yeah, come on. So good for Catherine Herridge, good reporting. But what we need to do now in the last 7 days here, 7 days, just get our people to the polls. Here's what I'm hearing out there. I just got back from a trip to North Carolina and Georgia. I was on a bus tour with some folks, and then I did 4 rallies with the presidents, had the opportunity to speak and listen. Here's what I heard. America's in trouble, deep trouble. Kamala Harris is responsible for most of that trouble. Donald Trump will get us out of that trouble. And that's the closing argument here. That's why I think that if we get our people to the polls, Donald Trump will be the 47th president. And time's on our side. I mean, I kind of wish there was another month to Election Day, because the more people learn about
Well, not me.
the less they like her. She's very unlikable.
That's true.
I mean,
Yeah.
let me put a plug in for Newsmax's Blind Ambition documentary. It's one of the, I wish everybody in this country would watch that, because it goes back to the roots of Kamala Harris and all the Marxist roots with her father and all her woke ideology pronunciations back when she was working her way up the ladder. And she's just she's not America. She's not America. She's California, San Francisco.
Yeah.
And that is no longer America.
100%. 100%. 100%. All right. Coming up next, let's see what we got here. Coming up next. Okay. Rig Watch is on, guys. Rig Watch is on. Very interesting piece coming out today. About the FBI being busted, rigging the 2020 elections. It seems like we were just talking about that. Let's take a look at what's going on here. Very good report. Very good report. And let me say. The laws are changing. The ballots are shifting. Media narratives are spinning. This is Rig Watch, your early warning system for election manipulation. We're tracking the paper trails, exposing the schemes, and shining light on the shadows where America's enemies operate. This time, it's time for transparency is now. The time for transparency is now. Let's go.
Morning, I think we should. So much churn right now. Avoiding Nathan's hot dog for infesting everybody's Facebook feed. The FBI busted trying to rig the 2020 election, and they did that by colluding and pressuring the social media companies to do their bidding. We got a new report. It's a monster one. You can see from the Judiciary Committee, it is over 600 pages, 641 to be exact, talking about election interference, how the FBI pre-bunked a true story about the Biden family corruption before the presidential election. So they spiked the story before it came, right? They were conditioning the social social media companies to nuke it in case something came up. And so we got a full report that we'll go through, starting with the executive summary here. But I want to show you what Jim Jordan posted. He says the FBI knew the Hunter Biden laptop was real, and it worked for months to prime big tech to censor the story because they knew it was going to drop. And so now this is the second federal agency, at least, that has pretty clear evidence that they were rigging the prior election. The CIA is already unequivocally involved. We can say that because of the 51 so-called CIA officials and the intelligence officers who signed it, remember there were 3, including Michael Morrell, who are allegedly, he denies it, but the House Oversight Committee investigated and found alternatively that he was being paid as a contractor. They work at CIA facilities, and they had their little letter approved by the CIA publishing board. That's 3 for 3, man. That's a CIA op. Same thing's happening here. They were doing it back then. It's the CIA. It was the FBI. You've got Homeland Security investigations and other entities that were all stood up to stop this from happening. So Jim Jordan shared this. Here's just one text that we'll look into further, but it says, but when we get hauled up to the Hill, says this unknown random person, hauled up to the Hill. Why? Are you doing anything wrong? Is there going to be a problem? To testify on why we influenced the 2020 elections, we can say we've been meeting for years with the U.S. government to plan for it, because that's what they were doing. It was not a free and fair election in any sense of the phrase. Now, here is what the executive summary says from Congress. They write, but when we get hauled up to Capitol Hill, we can say we've been working on this for years. Now, this was an internal Facebook message during their meeting with the FBI and other agencies. Here's the story. At 5 a.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday, October 14th, 2020, almost 4 years to the week, less than 3 weeks before the 2020 election. We're just 1 week out now. So just envision this happening right now, or 2 weeks ago. New York Post published a potentially election-altering news story about a years-long influence peddling scheme carried out by the family of Joe Biden. The Post article detailed how Hunter Biden leveraged his family's famous last name for significant gain. The information was recovered from a hard drive that was attributed to Hunter Biden, and the article included pictures of a signed federal subpoena demonstrating the FBI had already seized it, and they knew it was real. Neither Hunter nor the Biden presidential campaign denied the allegations. Indeed, the Biden Department of Justice has since authenticated it as evidence in federal court against Hunter. Soon after the news post was published, however, something strange happened. We remember this. Almost immediately, major social media platforms, including Twitter, Facebook, the modern-day digital town Square, censored the true, factually true story about the Biden family's influence peddling. As a consequence, millions of Americans cast their presidential vote unaware of serious, credible allegations of misconduct levied against one of the two candidates, brought through the free speech that we're all entitled to in America, that was then censored by the government, leveraging the social media companies. They say this censorship served to benefit one candidate over the other and wrongfully affected the outcome of the election. Today, these companies and their executives belatedly admit that their censorship was wrong, and they're referencing Mark Zuckerberg's letter where he said, yeah, we shouldn't have demoted the Hunter Biden story on Facebook. Yeah, little too late there. And remember, this is all too little too late from Zuck and these big tech bros, because he was blamed in 2016 for Trump's victory. They were very upset that Trump's ad guys were exploiting Facebook and getting a bunch of people excited about Trump, and then they cut all that off in 2020. They stood up the anti-Trump digital infrastructure, and then they executed it, and mea culpa, yeah, after the fact. Now, why were the social...
Real quick, I'm going to put drop a link in the chat right now. That's the Big Intel playlist. J-Man, I don't know if you're on Rumble or not, but we're on Rumble. That's a link over to the playlist. Every Monday night, we do a show called Unrig the Game, where we listen to audio books. Right now, we're listening to J. Michael Waller's Big Intel, which talks about exactly what you're saying right here. In fact, the premise of the book is how the FBI and CIA went from Cold War heroes to deep state villains, and it goes right along the lines of what you're talking about. I think you'll dig this book. Everybody here is listening to it with us. We're a couple chapters in, or a few shows into that, but that playlist right there will get you caught up. I usually do like a kickoff show for about an hour, and then we start reading. So if you want to skip ahead to the book, you just got to scroll ahead, and you'll find it. But this book is amazing, dude. It's amazing, and man, I can't ask anybody in the crowd. I just rave about this book when I talk about it. So, anyways, I saw you say that, and I wanted to throw that out to you. So there you go. And by the way, if you're ever on Rumble, make sure you hit the thumbs up. That's what gets us out into the Rumble algorithm. We only got 2 thumbs up right now. So if you can do that for me, just hit the thumbs up and maybe give me a follow. That'd be awesome. Love to have you around. But that really helps out a lot. And by the way, guys, we are 10 subscribers on YouTube away from hitting 4,700. Finally, 4,700. I never thought I'd see the day, because they shadow ban this channel. They try to suppress it. Because they don't like the things we're saying here, because we're calling out the truth and calling out the bad actors, and we are pushing forward the good stuff. And so they try to kind of really try to make sure that small creators like myself don't succeed. But you guys can help make a difference. If you're out there and you're new, please consider subscribing to YouTube. It would be a great help. We're only 10 away. Let's make 4,700 before the end of the year. Let's do it.
media companies so ready to censor a true story about Hunty that was in a prominent American newspaper called The Post that was actually true, that if you just looked at it, you saw it was true. It was clearly real. Because the FBI had primed them for it, that's why, for nearly a year, the FBI had been conditioning social media companies to expect a, quote, hack and leak operation from Russia involving Hunter Biden. And this is where it gets so insane. It's like the FBI and the CIA are framing foreign adversaries for a true story so that we go to war with them. Now, in more than 30 messages across 8 months, the FBI led big tech to believe that the allegations in the Post story were Russian disinfo, even though the FBI had authenticated the laptop for nearly a year before that. Beginning in early 2020, the FBI embarked on a concerted campaign to preemptively debunk, or to quote, pre-bunk the allegations of Biden family influence peddling. Federal agencies repeatedly warned social media platforms about a pre-election Russian influence operation relating to Hunter Biden and Burisma. Isn't that incredible? It's exactly like the real
Next,
thing.
we're
Wow,
talking about
it's
some
true.
of that
FBI is so corrupt.
aftermath
In many of these
possibilities.
meetings between federal agencies and big tech,
Election
the FBI raised the
possibilities.
topic of, hey, just warning you, there might be potential hack and leak operation. Oh, really? About what? I don't know. Maybe just shooting from the hip here, Hunter Biden and meth and Burisma and $1 million a month. Oh, okay. That's a little specific. Say these tech bros. Okay. And then it happens like, oh, there it is. Oh, in many of these operations, they were talking about election security and potential foreign influence operations. In response, some platforms even adopted new content moderation policies specifically designed to address these issues. Then, when the Post reported the peddling of Biden, and the morning of October 14th, big tech did exactly what the FBI primed them to do. They obediently treated the article as Russian and applied their moderation policies to censor it, hiding it from the American people. Now, of course, as was obvious then, and as everybody is widely acknowledged now, the laptop was real and its contents were authentic. You have to be a moron to think differently. Apparently, it's the FBI we're talking about. Now, it was not Russian disinformation, obviously. The FBI knew this too. It had been in possession of Hunter's laptop since late 2019. Indeed, in June, the Justice Department used content of this year. The Justice Department, the same agency that covered up for Hunter and warned him that they were going to go execute a search warrant on his storage locker before they did, so his defense attorneys could clear it out. The same DOJ then used the evidence against Hunter when he started to throw a temper tantrum because he wasn't getting his way. And yet the FBI not only primed social media companies to distrust the allegations about Biden, it misled them about the authenticity about Hunter's laptop after the story broke as well. Now, the FBI's duplicity notwithstanding, Congress says, big tech companies bear the blame as well. And I agree, by the way. They don't just get this, well, the FBI was pushing on us. They were. Let's be clear. If you're a company and the FBI is breathing down your neck,
Awesome.
that's totally inappropriate. It doesn't matter how big you are. It's the federal government. It's the U.S. government. But big tech companies here, I think they used it as a fake because they all wanted to do this anyways. Like, whoa, well, the FBI said it's Russian. Like, oh, okay, censor everything. Contemporaneous documents from the relevant period show that social media companies recognized and received information that the Biden family influence peddling allegations were actually not Russian disinformation, because they weren't. Nonetheless, senior leadership at these companies decided to take steps to hide this true content highly relevant to the upcoming presidential election because they knew a failure to censor the story could affect how Biden and Harris would treat them when they came in, right? These people, man, if we don't censor this and they win, they're going to obliterate us once they get into power. Here's the message from Nick Clegg. It says, well, on WhatsApp over at Facebook. Well, obviously our calls on this could color the way an incoming Biden administration views us more than anything else. ... That was an internal message between Facebook's then Vice President of Global Affairs, Nick Clegg, to Joel Kaplan, the Vice President of Global Public Policy, about Facebook's censorship of the Post article. So these two bros talk, well, I mean, if Biden wins, it'd be much better for us if we censored this for them. The Committee on the Judiciary and Subcommittee on Weaponization have been conducting oversight on this. And through a series of reports, we've revealed how the executive branch worked with social media companies and, quote, disinformation pseudoscientists to censor our online speech. This interim report focuses on the coordination between the FBI and big tech to suppress allegations in the 2020 election that were damaging to the Democrats. Testimony from key FBI and big tech personnel and subpoenaed non-public internal documents and communications obtained show that months before the election, the FBI provided social media companies with specific warnings. Here is what they said. What a coincidence. So weird how they just came up with this. Hey guys, it's just the FBI. Just a quick memo for you about a hack and leak operation. Looks like this. It says, who? Russia. The FBI repeatedly warned big tech of potential influence operations by Russian actors targeting 2020. They called it a hack and leak operation. They warned big tech that the influence operation would take the form of a hack and leak, similar to the leak of Hillary's emails in 2016. And they don't want that to happen again because Trump won in 2016. Don't want to have a flashback of that. Late September is when it was going to happen, or October. October surprise, priming them for that. The FBI repeatedly warned them either as an October surprise or as soon as the first presidential debate. Now, they nailed that one, didn't they? Then they said that this was going to reveal evidence about links between Biden and Ukraine called Burisma. What a weird thing. The FBI warned big tech that the Russian hack and leak operation would likely involve real or manufactured evidence concerning links between Biden and Ukraine, including the oil company Burisma. There it is, where he worked. Internal Microsoft notes state that a week before the Post story broke, the FBI tipped big tech off that this Burisma story was likely to emerge. It's just insane. The FBI is acting like a public relations firm for the Bidens, setting up the social media companies. And it worked, man. They did it. And the CIA did it from the other end too. Two of our biggest intelligence agencies totally rigging the election. It's crazy. It's sick, man. And they're still running things. So here's the threat assessment. They said, well, they sent this over. We've recently received indications indications from our U.S. government partners, FBI, that they believe there's a risk by Russian actors. Oh no. Likely involving real or manufactured evidence concerning links between Biden and Ukraine and the oil company Burisma. Timing is
no, and here's the thing: these big tech people that are getting this information, they take no offense to the fact they're being lied to. They take no offense to the fact they're being used and abused. They're just like, oh yeah, that feels good. Keep doing it. You know, I mean, even after the fact that they come to their senses and be like, okay, look, we're trying to do the right thing. We're trying to believe in it. Now we have a wake-up call. We know that they're lying to us. We know that they're using us. They're abusing us, and we're not going to take it anymore. No, they just go, oh, can we have some more, please? Can we have some more? Jacob Castro, what's up, my friend? How you doing over there? Over there on Rumble, Jacob Castro, man. So good to see you, my friend. So good to see you.
Uncertain, but could be as soon as September 29th, the first debate. While this assessment is still uncertain, and by the way, remember, over at the CIA operation where they were colluding to rig the election, Anthony Blinken was running around with Michael Morrell, ex-acting CIA director, and creating that letter. And they did it in rapid speed. They got it up and approved by the CIA before they released it. And then they gave it to Joe so he could use it at the debate. It was an operation to give him a talking point at the debate that was backed by the CIA to install Joe Biden. Message Wednesday, October 14th. Internal notes from Microsoft. October 14th, they say, uh-oh, guys, guess what? FBI tipped us all off last week that this Burisma story was likely to emerge. And today's call indicated that. Now, as documents produced to Congress show, the U.S. government, in particular the FBI, while in possession of the Hunter laptop, provided detailed warnings of an anticipated future Russian influence operation that mirrored the contents of the laptop. That sounds really specific. Where'd you get that from? Oh, Hunter's laptop. Wait, it's real? No, it's Russian fake info. Documents and testimony also reveal that FBI personnel who were part of the FBI task force providing these warnings, they knew the laptop was real, and they did it anyways. Armed with evidence of Biden family corruption, the FBI worked for months to ensure that once the story popped into the public, big tech would censor it. Their immediate reactions after the story went public confirm how the companies were primed. Here are internal communications that show that the company almost immediately deemed the story to be a hack leak. Oh, we're expecting this. That's it right there. On the morning of October 14th, Facebook employees exchanged candid communications about the story. So here's their Facebook group chat. Internal messages look like this. 8:37 in the morning, someone says, about what we expected in the hack leak department, it's pretty much exactly what we pre-gamed. Wow, this is weird. Their hypothetical possible leak is exactly what is now here. It looks like exactly the hack and leak scenario we'd expect, said someone else at 8:42. 9:06, someone says, can we check with the FBI Delaware if they have anything on this? The article claims the FBI has had the hard drive since December. So is it real or not? This person says, well, that's weird. It sounds like it's a hack and leak, but they said the FBI had the hard drive, so the FBI can clearly confirm, right? Someone else said, that's the exact content expected for a hack and leak. Someone else said, oh, bingo, right on schedule, trying to take out Joe. Facebook employee, someone says, this guy is not in touch with the FBI on this. I'll connect with Maryland, and this person will raise at the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force meeting today. Remember, Elvis Chan from the FBI was meeting with Facebook regularly, and the FITF, right, Foreign Influence Task Force, constantly to feed them info about people posting, misinfo about COVID and about elections and striking YouTube channels and nuking people from X and so on. Yeah, that's what was happening. They're FITF meetings. So FYI, our legal team is reaching out to the FBI on this because they've got the hard drive. Surely they would know and be honest with us, right? At 10:40, someone said, we're enqueuing the content with demotion and doing outreach to third-party fact checkers. So they're, let's go see what the Washington Post says about this, who also, of course, are going to say whatever the FBI said. So no updated info from the FBI, obviously. No outreach from the Biden campaign. They don't need to comment on it because you've already been trained like dogs. Is this the October surprise everyone was waiting for? Maybe. So some people are trying to think through. Other people are just demoting it, right? What's the FBI going to do? They're just going to say, rely on your training. Just they blow the whistle and they censor the story. That's it. Can you talk to your FBI counterparts to see what they say about this? They published the New York Post story. Yeah, it looks exactly like we'd expected right there. So-and-so has reached out to the FBI. Boom, they just got trained. Boom, Pavlov's dogs. Other documents suggest that key employees within the social media companies understood how their censorship would influence the election. Before the story broke, Facebook personnel understood that their response to an alleged hack and leak could sway the election. They knew it and they did it to do it. In the July 2020 internal exchange, a member of Facebook's trust and safety team said that when we get hauled up to Congress to testify on why we influenced the 2020 elections, we can say we've been meeting with the government for years to plan for it. Yeah.
Wow. Look at that. Look at that. They're already anticipating having to answer for something that's wrong. They shouldn't be doing. Why did you influence the 2020 elections? Oh, we've been meeting for on that for years with USG to plan for it. Yeah, that's a great excuse.
We know. They said nothing had changed by the time the story broke. On October 14th, the head of electoral and emerging risk for Facebook reacted by noting that it was only 482 hours to first poll close. So the clock is ticking. So we better stop this. The FBI has defended its actions as they just call it information exchange, right? Our corrupt government knows that they're not allowed to censor us themselves, even though they do. They can do it through a third party with private sector partners. Oh no, we just told them that guy's spreading vaccine misinfo, and they just go and they just nuke that account. Oh, that's good. So the FBI didn't censor it. No, they just leveraged a third party to do it and then berated them from the White White House, Rob Flaherty and others from the White House screaming at social media companies, "I thought I told you to respond to me," like little hysterical, whiny, petulant children, demanding that private companies buckle and bend to the federal government. It's sick, but that's what tyrants act like. So here you can see it was continuing on. The FBI, if their intent was to truly help social media companies, they should have shared this. The allegations that were alleged in the Post story were actually based off real credible information, like the hard drive that the FBI had in their possession.
Right.
The FBI failed to do that. If they really wanted to stop that, instead, they enabled a fake Russian hoax narrative to develop against a nuclear power who is innocent of this. While the FBI eventually conceded that it had no indication the allegations in the Post story were Russian at all, the Russians were innocent, only after an FBI agent mistakenly revealed to X, Twitter at the time, that the laptop was real, the FBI still withheld the fact that it had seized the laptop months prior, just allowed people to think it was fake, knowing it was real. It's a lie by omission, and they did it to rig an election. Now, as a result, Twitter and Facebook continued to censor the most significant story of the entire election cycle, limiting the reach of the allegations, all to the benefit of Biden-Harris. And is that a campaign?
Well, I mean, I think at least Facebook should be sued. X has new ownership, so
Contribution. Twitter suppressed the Post story by removing links to it. Remember that? And they applied safety warnings. They banned the account. Although Twitter lifted the ban on the story the next day, it continued to suspend the Post's account until October 30th, right? Nuked it. For a week, Facebook manually demoted the content by 50%, substantially reducing the likelihood it would show up in the feed. During this week, over 30 million Americans cast their vote, nearly 1/5 of the final vote total, and far more than the final reported margin of 45,000 votes that determined the outcome of the election, right? It's outcome dispositive. Now, the roots of the FBI's pre-bunking scheme date back to 2016. They got obliterated because they couldn't get a handle on the social media companies. They had to stand up all this disinformation stuff in response to Trump. I mean, the guy's incredible. Trump basically invented the implementation of disinformation in America because they're so panicked of him, and his supporters really had affected the integrity of the election. They said, we have to stop people from speaking out. Free speech. Fueled by left-wing denialism, a cottage industry of pseudoscientists, they're not even close to scientists, they're partisan hacks with lanyards, think tanks, and university centers sprung up to combat the alleged rise of misinfo and disinfo, all of which is what they said was responsible for Trump's victory. Because making America great again, no way, I mean, that's not possible for America to want that. So obviously Trump lied to them in some way, shape, or form because it shattered their worldview. There's no way that Trump and a strong America can overtake our vision for a global country like Hillary Clinton's was, like America versus the world versus being a global nation or something. Trump's vision was much better, so he won. But they couldn't take it. So they had to stand up misinfo and disinfo, call him a liar, fake Russian collusion stories, and smear him for the entire first term. It was nuts. The FBI formed the Foreign Influence Task Force. They stood, oh gosh, the Russians, which wasn't even real, as we saw from the special counsel investigation from Robert Mueller, right? Foreign influence. What foreign influence? It wasn't the Russians at all. It was you guys, the FBI and the CIA. These entities worked together with social media companies and they censored speech. It was conservative speech, all in the name of stopping disinfo and ironically promoting democracy by censoring your ability to speak in it. The FBI's pre-bunking of the Biden family allegations in the closing weeks of 2020 was merely a continuation of its earlier efforts to stop Trump. This is the same FBI, here we go, that abused its foreign surveillance authorities to spy on Trump's campaign in 2016. This is the same FBI that fabricated evidence to support a warrantless surveillance on a Trump campaign associate. This is the same FBI where senior officials bragged about, quote, an insurance plan to stop Trump from becoming president, and they promised each other that they would stop him. So we're talking Carter Page, Lisa Page, and Peter Strzok. This is the same FBI that has purged conservative agents from its ranks and asked employees whether their colleagues are supporters of Trump, and if they are, boot them out. Writing, the FBI's protestations that it is not biased against conservatives rings hollow when it actively suppressed true and explosive allegations concerning the family of the Democrat nominee in 2020. It is impossible to know what would have happened if the FBI had not pre-bunked this thing, but it's unquestionable that their actions definitely influenced the 2020 election, and it cannot happen again. So that is the executive summary from Congress. Here's some conversation. They're talking about newsworthiness. Okay, here are our options on this thing. It's the president candidate's adult son. So they're saying from Joel Kaplan, here are our options. We can go with the current definition, which relates to misconduct. It says Joe Biden's a prominent person, but I assume Hunter is not. So it's misconduct, so we can ban it under that. Or adopt a broader definition, given the historical view of misconduct of a president, could simply say that we'll treat close associates and family as if they were prominent people. Blank blank is someone who posted a hacked video of a candidate engaged in intercourse. We would remove that, right? Because isn't that misconduct? Or maybe we can split the difference. Nick says, okay, look, no need to ask Cheryl now. I think she was the CEO of Facebook at the time, right? She'll probably say take it down to most of these decisions, but we do need options to guide us on what could be an intense period of whack-a-mole. My instinct would be to remove this stuff here, especially as we will no doubt come under attack for allowing the original post to be going viral as we speak. I can't believe we're allowing this to go viral. I'm comfortable trying to shield Biden Jr. from intrusion into his privacy, right? So we're going to just protect him. Confirming that we will tell the Post, no Biden contact prior to referral to the third-party fact checkers. Someone else says, yeah, that makes sense to me too, Nick. At its core, the newsworthiness test is about weighing the public interest in seeing the content against the risk of harm. Both are pretty low here. It's not really news that Hunter Biden has done drugs or engaged in other bad behavior, but the risk of harm of leaving the stuff up is minimal for the same reason. Feels like the right line is probably the one blank and blank articulated. The right line is the current test. Allow hacked materials if they relate to the misconduct of a prominent person in public public life and treat only the candidates and maybe their spouses, but not the children as prominent people, right? So they're like, how do we rig this to shut this story up? Yeah, that seems about right. How does everyone else feel? Well, if we do think that the risk of harm of leaving the stuff up is low, we might also want to consider the operational challenge of trying to stay on top of actioning tens of thousands of pieces of content. Like everybody's talking about this. We have to like nuke all these accounts of people. Joel Kaplan says, well, I don't really buy how the adult son of a VP who's being accused of influence peddling for a foreign company is not considered a prominent person in public life. And if Fox concludes the misconduct is newsworthy, pretty consistent with the standards that have applied to adult children for presidents for decades, I don't really buy it's not newsworthy either, says Joel. That's right. Clearly it's newsworthy. Nick says, you mean tens of thousands of pieces of content re Hunter Biden or all the offspring of prominent politicians? You know, the former is a pretty atypical case right now. And I think we should be nimble in dealing with the atypical focus on him and his private life rather than solve for the operational simplicity on our part. It's like we should protect Hunter rather than having to worry about nuking all those accounts. So-and-so says, I meant content for Hunter. Someone says, slightly exaggerating, but I think I saw someone mention that there were 40,000 pieces of content on the laptop. Everyone wanted to talk about it, which is why they had to nuke it. Nick says, so where do we draw the line? I don't really understand why sex might be beyond the pale, but drug taking is fair game. Like, what's the difference? So like you guys would say, we wouldn't talk about sex, but you can't talk about drugs. Someone says, I would draw the line at pictures of him engaging in personal activities that aren't related to his father because they're images, we can bank them. And again, this is because the original images are subject to our hack policy. If he'd released the images or whoever was in the room with him released them, we wouldn't take action unless, you know, it was sexual activity that violates the policy. Nick says that intuitively makes sense to me. You know, Hunter is a legit object of scrutiny because of his alleged business ties and how whether he roped in his father to help him. But private images of sex, drugs released without his permission seems to be another matter. Then the Daily Mail, oh, they say, hey, we're talking on Facebook now. Hey, the Twitter team just released their explanation. And someone says, in addition to the Daily Mail, the New York Post also published some of these issues, which were rough. And Jack Dorsey just tweeted this. Sorry, is this in line with the decision? I want to be sure we have alignment. What are other high profile users? What are they posting? Are we holding all the images as well until the morning, or should we show Hunter's wiener to all of our users? If we can hold till the morning, I think we should. So much churn right now, avoiding Nathan's hot dog from infesting everybody's Facebook feed. I'll ask the teams to keep doing research overnight so we have a better sense of scale in the morning. And does Jack Dorsey's explanation alter our calculus? Like, should we just do what he does? Not for me. I thought they explained themselves well, and to be frank, that they put themselves in a more defensible position than we're in right now. Yeah, I agree that Twitter is in a much more coherent position right now, and that's easier to defend. I think either removal or labeling on newsworthiness grounds is defensible, if not equally well received. I think a demotion tied to possible falsity when none of the parties are actually suggesting that the emails are false. Who's saying they're false? No one. At least so far, will be increasingly hard to defend, this guy's realizing. The fact that the FBI apparently has the laptops may explain why no one in the Biden campaign is denying the authenticity, because it's true. This guy says, yeah, I agree with Joel. Joel says, awesome. Here's one from Super Wuster. Don't know what he says. Says, awesome. I bet he wishes he didn't light the fuse that led to our FTC case now. Joel says, I will see your Tim Wu and raise you a Josh Hawley. Remains to be seen whether he will try to do this before the election. Hawley posts something. This video is up on Twitter and Facebook. I assume we may see it submitted as an ad soon. If it hasn't already, it shows 2 emails. So then Donald Trump on Facebook posted a video. He's like, oh, we're going to see ads. Okay, so I flagged this for the IPOC to keep an eye out for ads. So Trump posted like a campaign video. They're like, oh, that's a good video. That's going to be an ad. So he's going to run that. So make sure that doesn't go live. We agree that this content in an ad should be rejected, right? Like Trump can't run that. Yeah, that would be our agreed upon policy application. So he cannot run that because there are emails. Hunter's emails are in there. Well, the team says their guidance is to enforce ad submissions reactively upon escalation. Is that your input? Where'd that guidance come from? I actually don't know where that guidance came from. So was just trying not to give contradictory instructions. Well, enforcing an ad reactively on escalation seems suboptimal because it means it runs. Like we don't want him to run it, right? So like we don't let it run and then complain and then fix it. But I didn't know where that guidance came from, so I didn't want to change it, right? So I have to follow the guidance. So that's why I said we have to do it that way. So they're telling them to do things differently. Yeah, but I want to avoid it running. Exactly. We'll ensure the team has clear guidance to proactively review and prevent. So don't allow them to run it. Might take some creative engineering or manual intervention, right? Because their policies tell them to go this way. An ad goes live. That's a problem. They investigate the ad. They remove it. This guy says, no, we can't do that. We don't even want it going live. Does anyone disagree? Blank blank suggested this was an instruction from the policy. Okay, so just want to make sure I understand, says someone else. The ads would not be rejected for misinformation because it has only been in queued for fact checking. It's in queued. It hasn't been fact checked. There has not been any fact checking rating to disqualify it, but we would reject ads based on violating our hack policy. Is that what we're going to say? Though we will say we are allowing the same content in organic because it's newsworthy. Is that what we're doing? Yeah, that's my understanding. So someone says, well, the newsworthy exception does not apply to ads then. Okay. Well, I thought this was the guidance from this afternoon's meeting. I'm afraid that I'm completely blanking on any discussion of proactive versus reactive. I only recall what we said. Is there any reason to limit enforcement to reactive? Not that I can think of. We're going to allow a proactive filter. The team is now working with engineering right now to allow a proactive filter. So they're just going to go out there, identify all the Hunter posts and just get rid of it. We're moving to proactive to the extent possible, but please speak up if you have any concerns about that. Very uncomfortable removing a rule when I don't know why it was established. They're just changing everything because they're hitting the panic button and they don't know what else to do. So it's amazing. You can see hundreds and hundreds of pages more that you can go through. Jim Jordan has a link to the full document over on his account, but they combed through it and they've got 600 pages, multiple exhibits showing us exactly what was happening here. All right. The FBI was pressuring the social media companies to nuke the story, and the social media media companies obliged, and they censored America, stopped one of the most important stories of the entire cycle from being legitimized, even though it was legitimate, in order to shoo Biden into the White House, and it worked. And it's the same people who are still running things. So FBI is still around, CIA is still around, our Congress is still funding them and might even build them a new stinking building. But the question is, are they going to do it again this cycle? We do believe they'll try, but our vote will be too big to rig.
There we go.
Called the Democracy Defense Coalition.
Right here. This is why you must prepare for the left's chaos if Trump wins. We've kind of covered this a little bit, but I wanted to go into a little bit more of a deep dive on this right here. And it starts with this part. Democracy Defense Coalition. You know, when it says this, we got problems, right? You know, we you know, when it says democracy defense, we got problems, right? So here we go. And this goes into something I think J-Man was talking about earlier as well. That, you know, they're ensuing chaos. Should Trump win, we won't be done. And we have to get him sworn in and in that office and has people in place. And we got a lot of work to do. It's not just the step 1, election day. Step 2, inauguration day. Step 3, getting everybody in place. And step 4, let's go.
Well, their planning included the election night war game that I told you about before the break. Teams of lawyers ready to spring into action and massive street demonstrations to help push public opinion. The entire strategy was laid out by AFL-CIO Michael Podhorzen in a secret internal memo. Winning an election was broken down into 5 steps, and I want to show you. These are the 5 steps that they outlined. And it's been since summarized in places like Time Magazine. Remember when I told you it was a conspiracy theory until Time Magazine took the whole thing after the election and broke it down into 5 steps. Now, in the context of today, we're going to use this because nothing really has changed. They break it down into winning the vote. Now, that might...
Okay, before we get started on that right there, I want to go ahead and throw this link out in the chat. This is going to go along with this. I covered this back in June 13th. June 13th, I did this stream. It was our introduction to J. Michael Waller as he did a sit-down interview with Tucker Carlson entitled Deep State Plans for 2024. This is to date, this stream is one of my most popular streams. And it has done almost 759 views to date. 759 views to date. Most of that coming long after it was published. So after it was published, it's had its runs here and there. Let me go ahead and just put this out. And it also includes a interview. You have to go to Rumble to see the interview with Donald Trump Jr. But the Deep State Plans for 2024, Tucker Carlson interviews J. Michael Waller. It's right there. There you go. So that after you watch this tonight, put that on your list to watch later, because that again talks about where these plans are coming from, the think tanks that are behind it, and so on.
Might sound rather benign and obvious, but pandemic-era voting made this a much bigger event than any other election in history. Election laws were getting changed. Massive mail-in voting was getting pushed alongside things like ballot harvesting and drop boxes. Battalions of lawyers were employed by the left to ensure that this would go unchecked back in 2020. And it's the same exact strategy today. Kamala has already promised teams of lawyers at the ready. Democratic Mayor Mark Elias, lawyer Mark Elias, he stopped over 60 election-related lawsuits last time. But now there are more. Here's Mark Elias on what's in store for us in the days and weeks ahead.
It's only mid-October, and there have already been 179 election lawsuits in 38 states filed this year, meaning that 2024 has already been the most litigious year for election and voting cases in American history.
I mean, look at this guy. He loves this crap. 179 election-related lawsuits spanning 38 states just this year. He's calling it the most litigious election in American history. And he should know, because they're his. The election hasn't even happened yet. Get ready, because it is coming. All the things that make us question the election, the mass mail-in voting, drop boxes, harvesting, all of that is part of first step, winning the vote. The fight goes on. Think how bad this is going to be next Wednesday if it's not a blowout, the day after the election. But it's not just operatives like Elias. This time, Biden and Harris Department of Justice is joining in on all of the fun. The DOJ has already sued Virginia, Alabama, and Wisconsin. They've already said that they're going to be showing up at all of the polling places and the vote counting places in Arizona. Why? Well, these states had the gall to remove non-citizens from voter rolls and switch to only paper ballots and hand counting. Seems pretty reasonable, but that doesn't fit into step one, winning the vote. So they'll be there. Step two, winning the count. This is important. Normally, this would be benign, but not anymore in America. This is why they'll say at some point on Monday night, well, we're not going to hear the final tally tonight. Really? Wow, that's weird. These progressives keep going backward in time. If the votes are legitimate, why make such a big deal out of this? Why does it take so long? Now, think about the left's mindset here. Election laws are now shady. A vast amount of the country doesn't trust mail-in voting, drop boxes, and harvesting. There are going to be disputes, and they have the teams of lawyers ready to go. The 2020 election war game mentioned multiple recounts to be called in for swing states. I think that's probably a given this time. How controversial will it be? And will Democrats ever accept the results? The next few weeks are going to be dominated by the lawyers, and we need to be prepared for that because the next steps
we'll be
when things start to get crazy. 3, winning the certification. Now, this is only an issue if they expect that the vote count will be so contentious that there's a major controversy. Before this, on January 6th, remember, I think it's December 18th, they have to seat the electors. Well, there's already talk that they're not going to seat the electors. Speaker Johnson stated recently that he expects Democrats to object to the electoral count if Trump wins. He didn't say, yeah, well, maybe, probably. They might. He said he expects it to happen. And Democrats like Jamie Ruskin have already signaled that that might be the plan, if Trump interferes with the process. And that goes into step 4, winning the electoral college. Representative Raskin said Trump is, quote, doing whatever he can to try to interfere with the process, whether we're talking about manipulating the electoral college counts in Nebraska or manipulating the vote count in Georgia. Just watch. They will claim the Trump campaign is engaging in some sort of shadiness with the electors and the electoral college. And just like that, they'll have their reason to upend certification on January 6th. We are all being primed for this. I don't know. Did you see the article from Politico? It was the very real scenario where Trump loses and takes power anyway. Really? Are you kidding me? Read this article in full, because I have a sneaky suspicion that they will try and accuse Trump of every single thing that is listed in here. One of them is to, quote, he will rely on congressional Republicans to endorse these alternate electors when they convene to certify the outcome. By the way, if it's the other way, Democrats will do exactly the same thing, but it won't be a big deal because they did it. He will try to ensure that Harris is denied 270 votes in the Electoral College, sending the election to the House, where Republicans are likely to have the numbers to choose Trump as the next president. They clearly have a plan, and it feels like we are being set up here. And finally, the very last step is winning the transition. I don't even know what that means. Wouldn't the election be considered over at that point? Well, not according to the left's playbook. They state, quote, winning the transition, steps that are normally formalities, but they knew that Trump would see as opportunities for disruption. What they accuse the U.S. of, or accuse us of, are things that they're already doing or have plans to do in the future. I don't know what they're cooking up, but don't rest easy if Trump wins, because we get all of this all the way through the transition. To the GOP and the Trump team, please, I hope you're prepared. I hope you have a buttload of attorneys ready and have read all of these documents. Throughout all of this, the left planned in 2020 to back everything up with waves and waves of street rioters. This included, and I quote, bail funds that could be activated in response to mass arrests, then had readied for separate fund to raise money for the families of anyone killed in violence or on or around Election Day. Wow, sounds peaceful. You're going to give people money if they were killed in those transitions of power? As I mentioned earlier, back in 2020, they had a map of all of the demonstrations planned out all over the country. But oddly, most of these progressive groups have been rather quiet lately. Are they not planning anything? Or are they staying under the radar? Well, my next guest, I think, might have an answer for us. She's next. There are several ways you can try to deal with the aches and pains in your life. Let me start with what you're doing right now. This movement on our campuses has been a lot quieter than they promised to be last spring during the fall. Is that coordinated with the left? Is that going to pose a bigger problem once the election happens?
Oh, it's absolutely coordinated with the left. The Islamists, as you know, are the radical Muslims who want to not only overthrow the United States, but the state of Israel. And so they came together in this network that I call the woke army, the red, which is the communists, and the green, which is the Islamists. And Glenn, you've been a leader in educating people about this. And I know that you could never have imagined it would have played out like it has over the last year, but they are not going away. I just read another tweet by somebody related to the election next week saying, we will never stop. We will never stop until this system is destroyed. And what is the system that they hate? From the left is the capitalists, and from the Islamist side, it is the freedoms that we know. And so I see them gearing up for next week. Glenn, I just watched your segment just now, and you are calling it spot on. People need to be aware.
I really hate to hear that. So
you hate to be a good fortune teller, right?
Yeah, I know. Well, because I don't ever tell good fortunes. So tell me, is there a way to escape all of this? Is there something that could happen next week? A landslide for one side or the other?
Well, Donald Trump absolutely needs to win by a landslide if we are to not see the chaos that you are predicting. Okay. It is going to go from the courts to the streets, just as you're laying out. And I just sent a request for comment from our friend, Mark Elias, because, it's so ironic. This man who is a lawyer and presenting himself as a defender of democracy is the soldier, really, in the courts, performing this legal warfare, and he's very proud of it. But the irony that I asked him for comment about is that he gets money through sources that we don't know. He is always railing against dark money, and yet he has funds, millions of dollars of money coming in through that network that you've also educated people about, called the Arabella Network. And why does that matter to what you're saying? Because in the courts, we have a multi-million-dollar effort to try to undo any victory that might happen by Donald Trump. And then in the streets, I know that the far left and the Islamists are gearing up to hit the streets in protest. They want chaos. And the project that you mentioned is because they want to influence our democracy.
So in a minute, I'm going to show the latest of what we can find on their plan for this time around, and it's not pretty. What advice do you have? I mean, you're part of your education and what you do is trying to dismantle extremism. What's the best thing that the Trump supporter can do when they're watching their country burn down, if that happens?
Well, I take a lesson from Martin Luther King's Nonviolence Project. He says the first thing that we have to do in any effort is educate. And so I'm going to quickly inoculate folks to what they're going to see next week. So this is a poster from Donald Trump's victory in 2016. And you laid out for folks how this was played out in 2020, but it went as far back as 2016. Immediately, the Muslim organizations came out with these slick and glossy posters about their Muslim vote. And what did they immediately do? They galvanized on the streets with the far left. And these are the images, right, that we love of a democracy, the Statue of Liberty, and what they talked about was the alleged Muslim ban that they were hyperbolic about. Yeah. And what they had is their convenient hashtag. So people need to understand that this is an orchestrated effort, first of all, and that it is led by institutions and organizations, many of them getting support from like-minded ideologues in China, Iran, Russia, and even North Korea. And so, first of all, know that this is not just spontaneous, as CNN and MSNBC will report. I'll be there at the White House, and I will see these signs, just like the ones I'm going to show you right here. What is that about? It's about Iran. And this was after Donald Trump came to office, and it was about Iran. Diplomacy makes us safer. And it was about diplomacy with the theocrats of Iran. And what's the fine print, Glenn? Can you read it?
MoveOn.org, it looks like.
It's MoveOn.org. And what was MoveOn.org? Yeah. What was MoveOn.org? It was created after President Bill Clinton got into a little bit of trouble, and the left and the Democrats wanted to MoveOn.org. Yeah. And so if Donald Trump has a victory on Tuesday, they will want to move on to repeal that victory. So just like you said, a landslide is needed.
Let me ask you, you have written about how this coalition is kind of shaking apart, and you're seeing it with the Muslim communities. Tell me about, is it shaken apart enough to break it, or what are you seeing?
Well, it's such shifting alliances, and they are not to be trusted. So what has happened right now is, for two issues, the traditional Islamist and Muslim establishments are breaking away from the Democratic Party. And so one issue was after October 7th, and the Democratic Party didn't, go all in supporting Hamas. And then the second issue was this war on children that's happening in K through 12 schools. So former President Trump received a ringing endorsement from Muslim organizations and imams even in Michigan this last weekend. And they cited the schools and K through 12 curriculum as one of the reasons why they were aligning now with Donald Trump. And then the second issue is that we have Muslims who are saying that they will not vote for Kamala Harris, but they're going for Jill Stein or Cornel West. And they're called uncommitteds, but they're shifting that way. And I want to just show people
we know this is all part of Agenda 2030. We know that critical theory is cultural Marxism, and that's where it's all coming from. Again, insights from the book Big Intel by J. Michael Waller.
They are going after the Democratic Party. They created this poster in which they coined "Stop Genocide Joe" and "Stop Killer Kamala."
Wow.
Because how are they united? They want to destroy the West.
Yeah.
So that's why I know it's sometimes easy to say, oh, they're always in bed with the Democrats. But the truth is, they're going to throw the Democrats under the bus, just like they always do, to get to their end goal.
Azra, I'd love to have you.
America.
I'd love to have you on either later this week or early next week to prepare as many people as possible to be ready for what is coming next week. I pray for a landslide, but I don't know how likely that is. But you're right; it's going to take that to be able to survive this like a normal election, I fear. Azra, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Glenn. Thanks for all your work.
You bet. By the way, the name of her book is Woke Army, and everything she's written is very well worth the read. All right, back in just a second. All right, it is very hard right now to have financial peace of mind when our country next week. What happens if the vote count is questioned? What happens if Trump supporters engage in protests? What happens on certification day, January 6th? Well, I want to show you this. In 2021, the Washington Post, 3 retired generals declare the country now must prepare for a real insurrection for 2024.
Wonder who they are.
If you read this article, they seem to be worried about dissension from within the United States military. In other words, some on the left are expecting an actual coup if Trump loses. Now, this is all obviously complete bullcrap. Trump supporters in the military are not willing to defy the government, nor should they, unless the Constitution is under attack and there's a foreign enemy from within. There are foreign enemies, but who are they exactly? This feeds into the entire January 6th hysteria the Democrats have been pushing for 4 years. But here we have these 3 retired generals talking about it. We need to consider how far the left is willing to go if Trump protests, no matter how peaceful they may be and gather in places like Washington, D.C. We never expected how weaponized the federal government had become on January 6, 2021. Consider that we still don't know how many federal officers were involved. We still don't know who planted the pipe bombs. We still don't know why Kamala Harris' Secret Service details deleted a text message from that day after whisking her away from the Capitol. What is the government willing to do this time? Well, as it turns out, there's been another new war game, and the White House, the Pentagon, and the Congress have all been briefed on the findings. A progressive veterans group conducted a war game on January 6th. They even turned it into a documentary. It assumed the worst, including a pro-Trump rally on January 6th, which spins completely out of control, including members of the military switching sides. Echoing the Washington Post article from 2021, the game attendees included some of the biggest anti-Trump fanatics in the country, including the Trump impeachment witness, Alexander Vindman, disgraced FBI agent Peter Strzok, General Wesley Clark, and I kid you not, Bill Kristol. Now, this is obviously fan fiction. This is what they dream. They wish this would have happened in 2021, but listen to the capabilities they talk about.
For me, the question is, what's next? So we have all this capability from a federal perspective. What can you do? What should you do if our guard forces and our law enforcement capabilities are not sufficient strength to be able to handle things? You can authorize lethal force to protect law enforcement officers.
Pause for a second. Is that correct? You could have federal...
We've done it on the southwest border. We could have federal troops that, with a presidential directive, can protect law enforcement with lethal force.
So they're talking about U.S. military authorized to kill American citizens, just to clarify. But it goes on.
But I would just urge you, and I know you've been resistant to doing surveillance on certain people, but you have to assume about the worst case scenario.
No.
What is your
I think that's right. And to be clear, my only hesitancy was to FISA on Strickland. Everybody else would be fine.
As former Governor Steve Bullock playing the president, discussing with Heidi Heitkamp potentially spying on his running mate. He's hesitant due to how bad that might look, but surveillance on everyone else, that's all good. Here's more of that discussion. This time, General Clark, playing the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, chimes in.
So, Mr. Attorney General, is there a way we could get legal authority to monitor General Sims and Strickland and what they're saying to each other and what might be happening?
I think that's a bad idea.
The short answer is yes. The question is whether
I just beat him by 0.6%. Right. And we're in a deeply divided country right now.
No one has to know whether we're monitoring this phone or not. No one has to know that.
Wow, no one has to know. Notice there's no talk about the Constitution here. It's just all talks about politics. Doesn't make it okay that somebody doesn't have to know. The scenario they're talking about is one that is clearly out of the ordinary and insane, unconstitutional. But how long would it take for Biden-Harris regime to jump to these conclusions if a few thousand protesters showed up to D.C. on January 6th? And we know that this was a war game. It was briefed to the Biden-Harris White House, the Pentagon, and Congress. Spying on Americans, authorizing lethal force on Americans. This is all interesting context given the recent update over at the Department of Defense. About a month ago, the Pentagon revised DoD Directive 5240.01. This is a directive that actually dates back to the Cold War and stipulates guidelines for if or when the U.S. military intelligence can assist domestic law enforcement. Well, before last month, there was a revision made in 2016, and it stipulates that military intelligence involvement is pursuant to presidential or congressional action. In other words, a time of war. And it also warns that, quote, it may not investigate U.S. persons or collect or maintain information about them solely for the purpose of monitoring activities protected by the First Amendment or the lawful exercise of other rights secured by the Constitution. Whew, okay, so that's comforting. Also, the fact that the words lethal and deadly never show up. One time in this version of the directive, they didn't talk about that. But now, here's the new version. The words First Amendment were taken out. Why? It also includes levels of authority, and the language this time adds in lethality, lethal force, death, or serious bodily injury. Why? Why would there suddenly be a need to refine the rules on U.S. military intelligence spying on Americans, a few weeks of pivotal election? Why did they feel the need to add the potential use of those assets using lethal force just a few weeks before that election? Well, we asked the Pentagon to clarify, and we got back an email that was very similar to the fact sheet they recently gave to Congress. We obtained a copy of that fact sheet. So this is apparently a nothing burger. It's just business as usual. Well, this is the official explainer to Congress and explainers to lowly outlets such as us. The response they gave us stated, and I quote, the reissue directive does not reflect any change towards the DoD's view toward its role in supporting civil authorities to include law enforcement. Rather, it provides clarification and delineates the approval authorities for activities conducted by the defense intelligence components. While the paragraph that has been most frequently referenced on social media is new to this directive, it does not reflect any change to DoD's policy regarding the use of lethal force by DoD personnel. That is addressed in DoD D 5210.56, arming and the use of force. Revisions of DoD issuances are routine and ensure that departmental policies continue to be consistent with law and the executive branch policy, and that they clearly articulate departmental policy. The release was in no way timed in relation to the election or any other event. Right. There's a bit more. We have the full statement up at glennbeck.com if you want to read it. But let me just summarize. Nothing to see here. The timing on the election is just a coincidence. And even though they added scary words, it doesn't change the meaning. And the DOD directive that they listed shows up as business as usual. DOD 5210.56. Now, what the hell is that? Well, here it is. And to me, this looks just like guidelines for the military that do security around their own bases and things like that. Now, is it just me, or why is this being used as the example? This just is business as usual. Could be nothing, could be something. We really don't know. The government language as usual is so full of bureaucratic bullcrap, it's impossible to detect. This is a recent fact check done by the University of Washington. They state that, quote, the spread of this story is due to a data void. In other words, nobody's telling anything, so we don't know, so people speculate. At any rate, I find it suspicious, given the left's recent January 6th war game and what they discussed. Were these revisions made because of this war game? Just to reiterate one more time, everyone was briefed, including the Pentagon and Congress and the White House. Is there something being planned for Certification Day? I don't think so, but I don't know anymore. Here's what I do know. You've got to get out and vote. Be safe. Do everything in the name of peace. Pray. Pray for our republic. I'm going to have more about this on radio tomorrow. I honestly don't know what happens next week. I was talking to Megyn Kelly today, and we were talking about the silencing of voices. What just happened to Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro? They're clearly being set up by the New York Times and the left as extremists that need to be shut off on YouTube. That's going to continue. If they get their way, or God forbid, there is trouble, you will lose voices like mine and like hers. Now, just a few years ago, she was like, oh, I hope none of this crazy stuff happens. And Glenn, you're usually so far ahead that we got lots of time. And I said, I don't think we do. Today, she told me how worried she actually was about the future. I mean, she said she had great hope that things were going to work out, but she kind of sounded like she wanted to hedge that bet a little bit. And so do I. I actually feel very optimistic about the actual vote. But can we trust the actual vote? And will the vote actually matter? I hope so. You just have to stay calm. You have to prepare. You have to prepare your kids mentally and physically that the world could change rapidly beginning next week. I also, and I hate to put this in because it feels like a shameless plug, but it's one of the reasons why I wrote it. I, again, don't know if voices like mine are going to be available in, let's say, the next year. I don't know. I hope so, but I don't know. The reason why I wrote Propaganda Wars is to be able to give you the skills that I and my team have worked on for 15 or 20 years. We lay out how we spot fraud. How do we know? What are the questions we asked? Who do we go to? How do you trust anyone? It's all laid out for you, because if voices are silenced,
learn the trivia,
which I believe they will do in the case of an emergency, you may be the only source that people trust. You may be the only one people can go to. You have got to make sure you are right. From Dallas, good night, America.
As we know, when you have the truth, you are right. Always better to know the truth than to be right. And you'll be right when you know the truth. Because being right comes with the truth. And that's what it's about. Always strive for the truth. Even if it means you have to make adjustments. Do it fearlessly. Be humble about it, because living in truth is what it's all about. It's what it's all about. All right. So let me just check to make sure I didn't have anything else on stock for the night. Yeah, we got through all that. Okay, we did it all. We got through all the playlists tonight. How about that? Good job. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate your support and being in this fight with each and every one of you. We're going to do this thing. More and more people waking up every day. The tipping point is here as the end game arrives. Step 1, get Trump elected. Step 2, get him inaugurated. Get him in that White House. Let him install his team so that we can begin to undo the corruption in our country and begin to undo their corrupt policies, plans, and agendas, organizations. We can close the border, make America safe again. We can start to take on the health crisis that's going on and make America healthy again, cleaning up our water and our food so we have a healthy future. Remember, the evil groups that are out there, they're waging a generational warfare against us, and we have to approach our solutions in that way. We start installing those solutions, teaching young children the trivium so they do not fall for fallacies. They can spot them a mile away and they reject them. That'll keep them safe from disinformation, propaganda, and all of the subversion in our system that's been here for generations now. Beginning to undo that on a generational basis is on the docket. It's on our list of things to do. But first, we have to secure our country. Stopping Agenda 2030. Next up, must be stopped. That is a globalist plan to enslave us all into their technocracy, their stakeholder capitalism, their wokeness, their DEI, their equity, all these things. And their entire agenda is based in cultural Marxism. And we will not have that. They would love to control us forever. They love to have us fighting forever. And we will heal division by putting back in the amended parts of history and teaching history correctly to the youngest generations. And in generations, hopefully we'll have a firewall against this type of corruption that we now face and fight today. And we can live comfortably in a country where we can be prosperous, healthy, and safe. And great once again. And we're going to do it. We're going to do it, guys. I will be back Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for Winning Saturday Night. That's our laid back show where we go over the good news of the week. We look at cool stuff. And we look at, watch a lot of funny videos. We just have a good time. It's a chill stream. And it's just for those who want to just kick back and have a good time, get some laughs in and have some fun. We work very hard here during the week. So we take Saturday night to just relax and have a good time together. And because we got a busy week next week. Wow, we're gonna be doing an election coverage, election night. Be starting probably about 7:30, 6 or 7:30 or something around there, and we'll be going for the duration as long as we can go. We're gonna try to see a secured win on that night. Hopefully, we'll be celebrating, but we'll be covering it throughout, making sure that we get our champion, our president elected, so that we can start to do all the things that is talked about. So thank you guys so much for being here. I will see you then. And for each and every one of you on every single platform, YouTube, X, and Rumble, stay based, get out and vote, bring people that won't vote, bring them, get them to vote, right? Stay based, vote, and play to the whistle, sprint to the finish line, and keep on winning.
From the wackos on the left to the MAGAs on the right, they know I'm beating Kamala. This race won't even be tied. Her policies are nutso. She's out her goddamn mind. She just repeats the same thing, regurgitating her lines. She thinks that immigration without paperwork is good. Clearly not too much power underneath Kamala's hood. Borders are, it's what you are. Borders are. Cackling Kamala, you're dumb. Mass inflation imminent if she weasels herself in. If that don't sound like fun to you, then you better help me win. I promise I'll secure you, you'll be in better hands. It'd be a flippin' free-for-all with what Kamala plans. Borders are, it's what you are. Borders are. Laugh it up, Kamala.